The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
I am also a publicly elected official. Okay. My salary is paid by your taxes.
Yes.
So if you need me to answer questions, we will not run away from you.
Asante
We will always be here.
The government itself is engaging in corrupt practices. That the government itself deliberately schemes to influence through bribery members of parliament.
You pay for a passport online. Alafu you're told there are no booklets.
I rebuke matters corruption because corruption has brought this country to its knees.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
Members of parliament, they go to settle, they're just promised, they get given tea, mandazi, and 100,000. That's not development.
External borrowing, 589 billion. Are we on the same page? What did parliament pass?
If anything happened to our president today, God forbid, that man would become president. Na ndio alilenga hizo stories za Shakahola.
The real thing is our constitution has only one person who is accountable to us.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
Baba should disown these experts.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Morning, Dennis. How are you doing?
Fiti sana, waje?
Kabisa mzuri sana.
Good to see you.
Good to see you. So it's a different place.
Looking dapper, eh?
Asante sana. You never thought that it was going to be like
Never
this.
thought it will ever end up here.
Well, here we are on the second Thursday of July, and of June. So I'm getting my numbers crossed already.
It's allowed.
Second Thursday of June, and what it is that it's the day when the budget will be read. The cabinet secretary will come and tell the country what will happen in terms of how the nation in the next year, between 2026 and 2027, will spend money, where it will get it from, and how it will be used. That all is in the budget statement that will be read before Parliament later on today. And in the Situation Room with KTN today on Spice FM, what we're doing is that we're having a special coverage of that budget. We will talk economics. We will look at the numbers. We will look at the biggest losers and winners in terms of those budget numbers and those estimates that have been given. When Cabinet Secretary FCPA John Mbadi comes before Parliament today, he'll let us know what they've been able to put together since the 30th of August. And what exactly it means in terms of how the country will spend its money, where it'll get it from in the next 1 year.
Yeah, and I think as well, I would just look at the big winners, the losers, and everything in between, how much we have to borrow to fund the deficit as well. But remember, we're not doing this alone. We have Kelly Boss as well, who's here. Kelly Boss, how are you? Good morning.
I'm good. Good morning, Aseto. Niko sawa.
So today is that day for you guys, the business desk.
It's that day that we talk about how the government is planning to spend its money. And of course, the government thinks about spending first before the money itself comes. And so there is, of course, the finance bill that was out that thinks about how that money will be raised through the fiscal year. And of course, most recently, the appropriation bill that tends to project how that money will be spent and where. That is outside, but today, of course, the substantive one will be tabled by the Cabinet Secretary, John Mbadi, on Parliament, and tell us exactly what money is going where and how it's being spent.
Yes, we look forward to that. But Nduh, lazima tusalamia watu.
Lazima tusalamia watu. Just remember that indeed live streams continue to be up. It's not a welcome to our audience on KTN. It's a welcome to everybody here on KTN and also on Spice FM. Live streams are up on YouTube, Facebook, and on X. And we'll say a hello to you in just a minute then to be able to hear where it is that you're tuned in from. And as we look at those numbers in terms of what's going to happen today. So you'll let us know where you're tuned in from this morning. We're able to get your live stream. That live stream is special coverage, again, of the budget. So it looks a little bit different, but you're still in the Situation Room this morning. We're broadcasting what we call a simulcast, broadcasting on KTN and on SpiceFM as usual. So you can let us know where it is that you're tuned in from, and we'll say a hello to you, and of course get some of those numbers into play. All right, so where are we this morning? Peter Kiari is tuning in this morning, tuning from Mombasa, and I think a little bit of something to start off the day. Before we get into say good morning, you do have a problem for us, don't we?
Yes,
we can't run away.
we
We've been in Guinea the whole week.
Yes. Now, the river never drinks its own water, and the tree doesn't eat its own tree. Doesn't eat its own fruit.
Okay, you're going to have to start again.
I love it. So the river never drinks its own water, and the tree never eats its own fruit.
Well, I guess we should get Kelly to tell us what his interpretation of that proverb is.
The river does not drink its water?
Its own water, and the tree never eats its own fruit. How would you interpret? What do you think Ghanaians are telling us today?
I think Ghanaians are telling us that is a more like a generational thought of point of view, in the sense, if you live on earth, whatever your role you play, you have to think multi-generational, that what you do today shouldn't be particularly what you enjoy today.
Right.
Exactly.
See?
You see? I think you should join us tomorrow morning.
For sure. As we look at post-budget.
As we look at post-budget, of course, we'll then be able to say what proverbs are in line there. So the Ghanaians are onto something, that's for sure. Of course, I think we're all giving something, that your role is not just for you, but other people to enjoy. Imagine if the tree ate all of its own fruit. Okay, so let's say hello to people who are tuned in this morning. We know that Peter Kiari is tuning from Mombasa and also has a word to share this morning and says, good morning from Mombasa. Instead of wishing you were someone else, be proud of who you are. You never know who has been looking for you, wishing they were you. Something to remember. Kisa Daniel is tuning in this morning from Attack in Uganda. Good morning, SpiceFM. TSR budget day. Meanwhile, the country is still choking in debt. This is David Mangera already, and we're getting into those things this morning. We're going to be looking at those numbers. Nashon Gogi is tuning in this morning. Good morning, Nduh. Dennis, is Shah still down? This would be day 6 if it is. It is. If so, then maybe what Riggy G said a few weeks ago about Shah may stop working in 6 months. Love to you all from Arizona. Luhimbo is tuning in this morning from Dar es Salaam. I will keep saying this over and over again. Once you paralyze institutions, the country cannot move forward. And we get imbeciles in political leaders. Okay, it's still a little bit early. It's before coffee time, but it seems that everybody's awake. Bwangi Juma says, good morning, SpiceFM. It's budget day, and we want to look forward to more pocket raids. And we look forward to more pocket raids by the taxman. James says, hello, no matter how much one craves choma, you don't slaughter the family dairy cow. Buy the future and don't sell. Okay. Leo says, hello, Princess Nduh and Aseto. The amount of forest being annexed by frivolous reasons is astonishing. And we start with Kakamega Forest, Nairobi National Park, now Meru. There's a lot. Isakale says, good morning. Hey, you're looking good. He has said you. However, I'm fully persuaded this government doesn't make the same mistake twice. They make it 5 or 6 times, is what Isakale is saying, just to make sure that they got it right. Wanda is tuned in from Toronto and says, good morning, Nduh and Aseto. You guys are looking fantastic. Asante Sana. Clement Ochola this morning says, good morning, Nduh and Aseto, watching from Malindi. There's nothing new to wait in the budget. Mutuflani, the princess and the gentleman. See, Munatesa this morning. Kidogo.
That's why we are here.
Very good morning, SpiceFM team, says Tibbs Muge. So the team is a lot bigger this morning. Of course, as we do this, grabbing the entire team across the standard group to then be able to have this special coverage of the budget. Bonjour too, says that Linda Gola, also tuned in this morning. It's good to see you guys are critically dissecting the budget here in Luhimbo, rather according to Luhimbo here in Dar es Salaam. There's no radio or TV that would do that. Yeah. Sheila Masasabi says, good morning, guys. Aseto, Nduh, and the TSR family. You guys are looking hot. Waiting eagerly for that special coverage on the budget. Have a great day. And to you as well. Cliff Sunday says, good morning, SpiceFM team. And good morning as well, KTN. Good change up today with more in-depth look at the budget. And if we have any hope in Kenya for fiscal discipline by the government, those are some of the things that we'll definitely be looking into. Melbourne is saying, knock, knock. We're going to knock, knock this morning and see who's on the other side of the door in terms of the money this morning. Mutuflani says, KTN, we forgive you for the chair. Next time, bring thrones.
All right. King and Queen, eh?
Exactly.
Yeah.
This we're talking about. The president is still on his world tour. It's interesting because things are still happening in Finland, and rather in Norway yesterday, in terms of a fishing port. Some of those things that we're talking to this morning. Jackie Onyanga is tuning in from Kisumu this morning. As Kimiak says, the president is still on his world tour, while his last finance bill of his one term is presented today. I need you to trust me when I tell you that nothing good will come out of this Kenya Kwanzaa regime.
Let me tell you, if consistency was a country, Kimiak would be the president of that country.
If consistency needed an image in the dictionary, the picture next to it would be Kimiak. Good morning, Nduh and Aseto. We are waiting to see what the budget has for us. Otherwise, you are looking fine. Live from Kisumu, and a very good day to you. Wanda says, an African proverb for you. As children of the same parent, we can share as little as a locust's head, meaning that fairness is very important when resources are scarce. All right. So those are some of the things that we're looking at this morning. Good morning, everybody. Wherever it is that you're tuned in from, the region, the country, the region, and indeed the world. It's Budget Day in East Africa, and we're looking into the details of it today, especially for what Kenya is then going to do. You will know today, in terms of what is going to happen coming out from Treasury, coming out from the folks who've been crunching the numbers for the last 1 year, and see what's going to come out of that, where Kenya is going to get its money from, how it's going to spend it, and how it's actually going to affect you. So it's the Situation Room on SpiceFM on KTN this morning. Nduh and Dennis with you, and we're going to look into the headlines in just a little bit and see what it is that's making the news. All right? Okay, so we'll get into that. And this morning, on the front page of Kenya's bold newspaper, The Standard, the headline today, People versus Mbadi. Of course, it is Budget Day. That head today is Treasury CS John Mbadi unveils a 4.8 trillion shilling budget after the opposition under the umbrella United Alternative Government unveiled a rival 4.3 trillion People's Budget yesterday, in which they proposed spending cuts, scrapping of SHA and the housing levy, and increased funding for health and education. The Kenya Kwanzaa government is under immense pressure due to soaring fuel prices, rising inflation, and growing resistance to new taxes. The ordinary Mwananchi say the government under President Ruto is tone deaf to what matters to them as it continues spending beyond its means while burdening Kenyans with higher taxes and heavy borrowing to fund a ballooning budget. Of course, budget is carried in the papers today on page 4, 5, 6, and 7. What does the opposition say versus the government? Total budget, 4.32 trillion. All cuts are concentrated in the executive administration waste, non-essential security overheads, vanity infrastructure, and cancelled contracts. So they say that out. What the government is saying on their budget, 4.82 trillion, it's an increase by 124.9 billion shillings from the 2025-2026 supplementary estimates 1, with recurrent expenditure rising due to higher interest payments on existing public debt. Projected ordinary revenue, and I know Kelly Boss will be giving us some of that information later, but according to the opposition budget, 3.72 trillion shillings is what they're proposing. This would include a sale of stalled affordable housing projects at market value, simplified rental income, taxations targeting large-scale property investors, evading taxes through complexity. What the projected ordinary revenue is 2.99 trillion. This will be largely driven by improved performance on income tax, VAT, import duty, and excise duty collection. So what are we seeing there? That there's more that's coming in from taxing you and me.
Your pocket.
Fiscal deficit on the opposition, 593.5 billion shillings. Domestic borrowing capped at 500 billion shillings, getting rid of ghost workers, duplicate payments, and reprioritization of non-essential capital projects. While the fiscal deficit, according to the budget that Mbadi will give this afternoon, this will be primarily financed through domestic borrowing, approximately 90% of total financing, indicating a significant reliance on local sources. So that's what that looks like on the headlines, rather the front page of the Standard today. We also know that the World Cup bonanza, let the games begin, is what we're looking at today. The first matches of the World Cup take place today. And looking in on page 2, House team warns tons of raw sugar import could be harmful.
Yep.
In case you didn't know, there's some more sugar.
Surprise, as if we didn't know.
Was it hiding somewhere? Youth SMEs urged to embrace manufacturing for more jobs.
Wait, repeat that again?
Youth SMEs urged to embrace manufacturing for more jobs.
What's the cost of doing business?
I don't know, but if you were to embrace something, it had to be there, first of all, in order for you to embrace it, one would imagine.
Exactly.
So it was interesting because this next story finds its way into one of the columns on page 2. Nairobi MCA sat yesterday and they decided that 2 people who sit in the administration of Nairobi County should actually be arrested.
Yes.
Nairobi MCA's order arrest of missing finance CEC Karich. The Nairobi County Assembly has ordered the arrest of finance CEC Charles Karich. Yesterday failed to appear before the Committee on Implementation to discuss the 2026-2027 county budget.
Isn't the man in Dubai? Did he come back?
I don't know.
Because if he were back, then we would have known that he would have been arrested because there was a warrant of arrest, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
So
he could be a bit busy.
MCS, Nairobi, Ako Dubai.
So they said, but we also agree that he should be arrested because you're making our work very difficult. It's interesting that they're talking about budgets 2026, 2027, and the man who holds the purse for the county then is absent because what does that mean?
Yeah.
Looking into other stories, lunchtime, Baba Tonglo relive life struggles and amid tight budgets. Many years since these songs were done, most Kenyans still can't afford basic needs. Do you want to sing one of Baba Tongolo's songs? I don't even know.
I can't even remember.
Can't remember.
Forgive me.
Okay, we forgive you.
Forgive me.
Husband now loses battle to bury gospel musician Wandeto. The family of late gospel singer Rachel Muthoni Wandeto can finally breathe a sigh of relief after a Kerugoya court brought to an end a burial dispute. Resident Magistrate Harrison Mwangi yesterday authorized the release of Wandeto's body to her mother, Sarah Njeri, paving the way for burial preparations to resume at the singer's ancestral home in Kirinyaga County. So it doesn't go to her husband, body goes to her mother. And of course, it is budget day 2026-2027 this Thursday. The Cabinet Secretary goes to Parliament this afternoon. Body's 4.8 trillion shilling budget raises tax fears amid economic stress. Some of the things that we're looking at today. At a glance, 4.82 trillion shillings, you're going to hear that number quite a lot today, is the budget for the next year. 2.899 trillion is what the national government will spend. Of this, 1.98 trillion will be recurrent. So you're keeping the lights on, paying salaries and things like this. And then 845 billion will go to development. 420 billion counties allocation. So they still didn't really agree. They wanted to get that up to 445 billion from the Senate at least. And the National Assembly wanted to bring that a little bit lower.
I have a suggestion.
What's your suggestion?
After West, you have the money for the counties.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
We know exactly what we need to do.
Somebody somewhere is listening.
Yeah.
I reckon. 50.8 billion shillings is Parliament's allocation. That's the money that they get to do all the things that they need to do. All right. 30.4 billion shillings is the judiciary allocation. The budget will be financed through 3.63 total revenue that include tax revenue of 2.99 trillion and appropriations in aid of 644 billion. So some of these terms, you're not really sure what they are. That's why we're doing this today, to then be able to look into what those mean. And of course, Kelly Boss will be able to share some of that. 1.1 trillion shillings is the budget deficit. So when we're saying what the budget deficit is, that means this is the money that they do not have.
We do not have.
Yes. 1.1 trillion shillings is in the budget, but you don't have that money.
Yes.
So you're going to look for it. And the only way to look for it is borrow it. And from what we've seen so far, that the domestic debt, which according to an economy-facing government should do, is that domestic borrowing should actually be left to MSMEs.
And businesses,
But
so this is a complete opposite, eh?
Yeah.
So close to 1 trillion shillings will be borrowed domestically.
Yes.
And the remainder, 116.2 billion, is foreign borrowing.
Yes.
So then one asks the question, I think the Cabinet Secretary should equally explain what effect that would have to MSMEs and businesses in the country.
Well, essentially what you're saying is that the next 1 year, you're again crowding out MSMEs from the pie in terms of what they can do. And we know that one of the biggest hurdles towards business growth is access to credit.
Yes.
We know this already. So what you've said through this budget, one of the things that you've said, and I know we'll be talking about this later with Exen Iraqi and Abraham Rugo, is that you've crowded out MSMEs. That's what you've done for the next 1 year. Weak revenues test Ruto's bid to shift from debt, of course, looking into Finance Bill 2026. That's another story making it into the Standard this morning. Opposition's shadow budget cuts bodies by about 500 billion shillings. Securitized taxes levy swell debt by 1 trillion, and that's what we're looking at, that you're going to borrow to the tune of 1.1 trillion again. There's a story here on page 8 in the national pages about how schools can prevent dormitory infernos. It can actually happen. It can be prevented. And also then going into a little bit of a politics, allies say Gachagwa's comeback after retreat to shape 2027 race, that regardless of what happens, he seems to be still in the race.
So he was going to take a sabbatical then?
Yes. It might interest you to know that on page 10 of the Standard, that there's a story about how a Lebanese firm has now sued KPC for 10.6 billion shillings contract dues.
Okay.
This is the same KPC for whom there was a partial divestiture of government shares.
Which was oversubscribed according to expert, Yunbadi, FCPA.
But now, because of things that you didn't quite get right in the contracts, the firm has said, how about you pony up 10.6 billion shillings because we're going to kind of need that. Okay.
The president said the other day, dawa ya deni ni
kulipa.
He was telling that to Harambee Stars, so kulipa deni.
Oh, they got their thing? Yeah. Okay. Boost for teachers, but free education pushed to the edge. Of course, we're talking about education, and we did see that Education Cabinet Secretary Julius Ogamba had a presser yesterday. He talked about the fact that, okay, we've seen all these things happening, things are going to remain. We're only looking at about 204 schools that have had a problem around the country, but, you know, we're going to be fine. We're going to keep the dates as they are, but then perhaps next year, not now, because, you know, already well into the second term. Next year, we're going to look at the dates, maybe reduce
make them equal.
Yeah, the
so
length
from 14
of the
weeks to around 12 weeks across board. So
I mean, the second term right now is the longest.
Yeah.
So what they say, they're going to reduce the number, well, the length of the term.
Are we really addressing the problem, though?
Address the issue.
Thank you.
I'm yet to put it on a T-shirt, but I'm going to at some point. Address the issue.
Yeah.
Shortening the term, okay, perhaps we'll deal with one of the symptoms, but address the issue.
Address the issue. Address the issue.
If we're not addressing the issue, we're going to have a problem. Also, so, of course, we see the principal secretary being moved.
Yeah.
And another one coming in. Let's see what that is actually going to achieve. Well, it's going to be interesting. Of course, looking to the opinion pages, Daniel Nganga talks about how PPPs can deliver universal access to clean water by 2030. And others have talked about what they want in Badi's budget. This is Dennis Kabara. So there's a lot happening. Get yourself a copy of the Standard newspaper today. You can also get yourself a copy of the Standard e-paper. If you can't find it on the street, you can get it in your pocket. All right.
Yes. So let's go to the Daily Nation real quick. Now, a World Cup like no other is the headline. So it is a repeat of the 2010 fixture where the 2026 tournament kicks off today in Mexico with co-host facing South Africa. South Africa, Mexico. I'm at what your story.
Look.
Yeah.
The continent is needing Mexico to win this match.
The continent.
Yes.
All right. So and we go to Ruto's election budget. Now, huge allocations for infrastructure projects like roads and railways feature in last full year budget for President Ruto before next year's general election. That's story in page 4 and page 5. Now, 4.8 trillion shillings is the amount the government plans to spend in the 2026-2027 budget. One asked the question, how are we going to fund the budget? Now, a special World Cup as 48 nations clash in expanded format. Now, for the first time in history, the world's biggest single sports event would be hosted jointly by 3 countries. Now, tell you what, there's that, the gentleman, the referee who was denied entry into the United States, landed back in Somalia, and he was received as a king. An entire football stadium was there to receive him. And they say, you know what, you are our own, we support you, we love you, and keep on doing the great job. Now, funds in a frenzy as the ultimate football fiesta kicks off today. Now, 48 teams will be competing in the expanded tournament hosted across the Americas, US, Mexico, and Canada. With the big match today, South Africa and Mexico as well taking place today. We're looking forward to that as well. We shall be having a conversation with Robinson Kenya a little bit later to just tell us the expectations and the preparations as well, because there is a show that covers World Cup right here. Now, inside Ruto's poll budget with the sweetener for voters. Now, mega infrastructure projects such as roads and the standard gauge railway will receive generous funding in the president's 4.8 trillion shillings budget before the 2027 election. I reckon I needed the standard gauge railway immediately got into office. I needed these roads, infrastructure projects when he got in office, because that would then have been good campaign material for me to give you my vote. As at now, I know you're doing that because of the election, and perhaps I have to ask myself the question, is it, many would call that a bribe, or it's a token? It's a token for me to vote for
persuasion.
It's persuasion. Persuade me, sir. And Treasury CS Mbadi will today deliver a speech on this year's budget, which the government has promised is modest in new taxes to preempt public anger. Is the public angry? Is the public satisfied with this? Enough? Let's wait and see what Kenyans will say after the budget statement is given to Parliament today. Now, opposition unveils people's budget and they say they propose higher funding for schools, hospitals, and youth jobs. That is why leader Kalonzo Musyoka addresses journalists during the presentation of the people's budget at SKM Center. Now, students' unrest spreads to 2 or 4 schools as ministry plans calendar review. We've already gone through that. And reshuffle. Did Bitok talk his way out of education docket? I don't think he talked himself out. I think he performed himself out.
Well, perhaps what he said is what was the final nail in the coffin. Like, okay, fine. It's clear that with your overt expression of what or how you think this thing should be sorted out is what basically walked him out the door.
Yeah. But in terms of this performance, how would you rate him out of 10?
Out of 10?
Yep. Where 10 is the highest score.
I don't know.
Okay, let's move.
You know where I stand on these education matters.
Where are the other 22 questions mount over missing Ebola units? Health Ministry has not provided details about Ebola quarantine facilities it said are being put up to boost preparedness. So, we were told there are 23 Ebola units that are being set up across the high-risk counties to ensure that you're able to deal with Ebola, right? But all you've been hearing is the quarantine facility in Nanyuki. So, where are the 22? Comment?
No comment.
It is in that speech and that statement. That's where it remains.
I think that if they were in other areas, people who reside in those communities would actually be aware that these facilities exist. It's like if a football pitch or a hospital
or a
school or a road has been put up in your area, you would know. No?
The people to give you the greatest and best feedback mechanism is the people using those facilities.
Exactly.
Never in those statements you gave us. Now, employers targeted over 100 billion shillings unpaid housing tax. Now, housing officials push for law change to empower tax agency to recover unpaid deductions as civil debt amid growing concerns over widespread non-remittance and legal enforcement gaps. Now, the State Department for Housing is seeking amendments to the Finance Bill 2026. The outstanding issue is non-remittance concentrated among some employers, equipping the collector to address it in the public interest. Okay, so what's about mambo ndio haya? As we go forward, now we have opinions here as well. Climate risk, more than just an environmental concern, and no suluhu violence isn't the solution. Even remember.
Okay.
Well, there's no solution. Here, Suluhu is not the president. Suluhu is the solution.
It's the solution.
Yes.
And we're saying that violence is not the solution.
Yes.
Okay. Looking into the Star and some of the, of course, it's a big one. It's the world's biggest sporting event. Many would say the world's biggest event, whether it's a sport or not, and that's the World Cup. Takes place today. And who's going to shine for their country? The Star's illustration there. We're also looking at the headline there that Gachagua borrows from the Uhuru ICC playbook. Looking into terms of that. New disaster law ends years of ad hoc emergency response. A ministry to shorten second term, says Education CS Ogamba. And so just coming back into that headline where about Gachagua, is that it's believed that he'll be in stronger position to fight impeachment as the president.
Yeah.
Those are the things that we talk about when the law is very clear, and then perhaps it's not.
The law is very clear.
That will he then actually then be able to fight this impeachment? Are those the things that we're actually looking into? China-Africa Forum pushes for stronger farming deals. Expect 3 dry months before the El Nino rains. So perhaps El Nino will not come.
Not yet.
Not yet. It's going to be 3 months of dry.
So it's expected in October, November, and December.
Yes.
Oh, December. That's my birthday month, man.
Yeah, okay. Let's finish with
So you'll be swimming?
You'll be swimming doing a birthday. If you don't know how to, now is the time to get
time to get a boat in Nairobi.
Exactly.
Sakaja. Fungua bwana hizo mitaro.
IG Kanja appoints Tanui as the new GSU commandant. It looks like there is a little bit of a shake-up in the MPS in terms of who's going where, but that's what it looks like for him. Also, looking at other headlines here that go into the Star, the stories that are making the headlines. Looking at that, Gachagua borrows from the Uhuru ICC playbook for his political survival, and you might wonder what that is. Former Deputy President Rigathi Gachagua is pulling out all the stops to ensure a place in the 2027 presidential ticket in a move that could trigger fresh turmoil within the united opposition. What does that mean? Tuesday, he announced a 45-day conclave at his Wamunyoro home in Njeri, aimed at building consensus around a single presidential candidate to face President William Ruto. But insiders in Gachagua's DCP camp say the marathon discussions will not focus on opposition unity, but will center on Gachagua's own bid for the top seat.
Okay.
So he wants the thing.
Yep.
Everybody who's been talking about a united opposition may not take into consideration that Rigathi Gachagua wants to be president of Kenya. So he's going to do everything that he can to make sure that he is.
Yeah.
So conclave until you see white smoke. I don't know what's going to happen, but the white smoke will be in the shape of Rigathi Gachagua.
Exactly.
That's what he wants.
Exactly.
It's probably what he's going to push for. Linda Mwananchi expansion threatens established parties. Okay. And there's alarm growing over the number of Kenyans trafficked to Cambodia and Myanmar. I don't know why the alarm is... this is one of those times when, as a journalist, you just are at a loss for words, because if it's still alarm that's growing over things that have been established, that people are having a very difficult time when it comes to looking for jobs, getting these jobs, and then getting to the other side, and it's something totally different from what you were told, what you paid for, and what you expected. Put a cap on it.
I mean, one asked even the question, immigration department at the airport, right? One asked the question, do you ask the relevant question to where this individual is going, their contact person, and are you able to communicate with them to ascertain that what they're telling you is actually factual? And as well, perhaps linking these individuals with Kenya's diplomatic corps out to the country in these countries to ensure that these individuals end up where they say they are going. I mean, it shouldn't be a shock.
It shouldn't.
It shouldn't. And you see, you've done international relations. I think that would be the strategy.
Yes.
So that should be advisor to government. Hello, sir. I am here.
There's one Dennis Aseto is here. All right, so then looking at the business day, of course, the business daily is carrying Badi's new dilemma in funding a 4.8 trillion shilling budget. And Kenya treads on shaky revenue base on the Middle East war. State forced to halve fuel VAT after national outcry. We'll just look, of course, it's all the numbers today. There is a notion that the power business is lucrative and must be controlled by bedfellows. George Aluru says that this morning. Tough finance bill, healthcare firm lines, and 601 million shilling specialist cancer hub in Nairobi. And when will Africa's side win a World Cup? Who's come close to that? Those are some of the things that are carried on the Business Daily today. And looking into some of those stories where we talk about, you know, the electric vehicles issue has been an issue.
EV, yes.
Yes, for the longest time. Simba Corp now invests 1 billion shillings in the electric vehicle assembly line. And so from that, we can look at one or two of those stories and how they hold some sway. All right. that there was a people's budget that was done by the opposition was interesting, and that they were able to put those numbers together to see that this is what you can actually do. We can reduce the numbers and then probably also reduce what you're going to do in terms of borrowing. That it was interesting that weak revenues test Ruto's bid to shift from debt. President William Ruto's ambitious plan to reduce Kenya's reliance on debt-funded mega projects is facing a hard fiscal reality marked by persistent revenue shortfalls, a widening budget deficit, and mounting pressure on public finances. Analysts warn that the challenges could complicate the National Treasury's efforts to reduce borrowing and shift towards increased use of private capital to finance infrastructure and other strategic development projects. The debt issue is a crippling one. If it's not handled, it will continue to be a problem. You can't have a 4.8 trillion shilling budget and a quarter of that you want to fund through borrowing. And that, of course, we're going to be looking at appropriations. Kelly Boss is going to be with us in just a little bit. But when you talk about where you're going to get the money from, finance bill, how you're going to spend the money from, appropriations, then if you are not able to spend the money as per budgeted, and that you really don't have enough to go around, then you're looking at a problem. And that your revenue then goes to 70% debt payment. Then there's a problem. And so that's why it looks difficult if we're looking at Finance Bill 2026. And we also know that the Finance Bill, at some point, having been discussed and debated and accepted by Parliament, will then become the Finance Act, and then you will know for sure that is how you're going to finance the budget into the next year.
You know, if you look at the people's budget versus Mbadi, one asks the question, there is the aspect of debt where in the 4.8 trillion shillings that we want to, that is our budget, there is the debt question where it is the first vote that you have to deal with, you know. And how much are we planning to pay? Over $1 trillion plus. You know, that together with the fact that you're going to borrow again at 1.1 trillion shillings to fund this budget. So the debt question and the debt registry that we ought to know, also the odious debt question, must be addressed for us to say, as Kenya, we know what it is you're paying for, and the monies that got lost, that monies that never got into the country, that was misused, the individuals ought to pay it.
Indeed, they must. You're talking about what would win or what would lose.
Yes.
So Kelly Boss is going to come in and have a look at the numbers for us, the biggest losers and winners of this budget, which is going to carry on into a conversation that we will have at a later point during this special coverage of Budget 2026-2027. We're going to hand over now to Kelly Boss to look at those numbers for us. Kelly.
Thank you very much, Nduh. Every service debt and perhaps also do a little bit of development, and I'll tell you why I'm saying a little bit of development. So the numbers you're seeing right there is that big 4.81 trillion, and of course this after review might go up, Nduh and Aseto, because on the previous budget on this day, the appropriation committee came up with 4.2 trillion. In the end, that ended up being 4.6 trillion. So that 4.8 trillion is just a number that the government thinks could fit, but in the end, we don't know how much that how far up that will go. And of course, that is a 2.7% growth. You know, this financial year is a very critical year for the government, especially building up to the election. So you'd see a lot of fiscal discipline by the government. That's why it's only 2.7% increase. That's 124 billion right there. So there is fiscal discipline. They're thinking about how can they put up this stance that may allow them not to look like they are not fiscally disciplined, especially owing to the growth in deficit and our loans out there. And of course the funding gap, which is really critical, and I'd like to stay there for long. That's why I've gone through the bigger number quite quickly. The 1.1 trillion is very important, and it's a 5.4% of the GDP. And let me just explain that 5.4% and what it means, When you look at the 5.4% of the GDP would mean, and how you calculate and arrive to that 5.4% is, there is the nominal GDP of a country, where you look at the country and say, how much is this country worth? How much our assets worth? How much is the economy at large worth? So the treasury depends on the national statistics bodies to come up with a projection of how much we are worth. And you'd find that in general in Kenya, the things that we have and everything in terms of development and assets and everything, we have around 17.6 trillion Kenyan shillings. That's what we are worth. That's what, if we say, what are we worth in general? That's what we are worth in terms of everything that we have. So that is, the 5.4% is arrived at by getting that over 17 and then times 100%. And so investors would look at that number and say, is this country worth investing in? So if our debt is 5.4 of that number, it's worth it. Looking at this other side of the money, of where it goes exactly, it's interesting. I'd want you later on to look at the 17.5% there of the development expenditure, which is glaring a little bit, but the recurrent expenditure forms up 4.6% of the budget, which is over 2 trillion Kenyan shillings. That is what the government is planning to spend on, salaries and every other thing about, just recurrent expenditure. But according to the Constitution, it requires that when you come up with this budget, you have to, allocate at least 30% to development expenditure. We are doing 17.5% of that, yet we are still borrowing. So I don't know, because, if you don't invest in development, then where will the money come from? If you develop, then the economy might grow. And then those consolidated fund services is 1.5 trillion. Those are mandatory because this is what goes to debt servicing, paying our interests, paying pension funds. Even as we move on, that is not touched even by the parliament. They cannot revise that up or down. And then, yes, this is the consolidated fund services. Of course, it's 1.5 trillion. It's rarely touched because it's so important. We have to pay our debt and we have to pay pensioners and stuff like those. And then, of course, and here is where also the judiciary lies. Constitutional officers like the judiciary get their money or salaries straight from the consolidated fund services. And then interest payments is up 1.2 trillion. And that just goes to service our debt. So moving on, again, another thing to look at is the Finance Bill 2026. Of course, in the Finance Bill, of course, is how the government thinks it will raise money from taxes and other avenues and meet the budget expenditures. Yeah. So the Finance Bill tells you where the money will come from. We have looked at the Finance Bill and picked up a few things that we think have changed. And of course, the most contentious is the mobile phones and wireless devices going for 25% excise duty. And according to the Cabinet Secretary, John Badi, he says this 25% will be taxed after you buy the phone or after you put on the phone. Yeah, so yeah, that's one. And then another one on this Finance Bill that where the government thinks it can raise money is on green transport energy. And this is on electric buses and everything. That is VAT exempt. And quickly, just to say, previously it was zero rated, and VAT exempt means anything as we move forward, anything that these manufacturers or assemblers would use on their, putting together these electric buses and everything, they will knock down that price on you as the consumer. That's exempt. If it was zero rated, then it would be different. Now on lotteries and 20% withholding, this is another place where the government is putting their hands deep inside that pocket of a gambler and guys who do the lotteries. And that would mean if you win 20% of your win, so maybe you put 100 shillings, you win 10K, that means 9,900 shillings. 20% of that is what they are trying to put their hands inside. Of course, there's another, as we move forward, there's another 5% they're already taking. So the government thinks putting their money, their hands inside of these things is usually good, of course, to control betting. And then on scrap metal, it's usually very hard to tax this sector. And of course, the government, even as John Badi was talking to us the other day, he said they're looking into bringing in the informal sector into the tax base, because it finds that some guys who are untaxed, except when they buy bread. So here's the scrap metal. The retailer of the scrap metal will retain 1.5%, and then they'll knock down that price when they convert, because you can't sell scrap metal to a local Kenyan. You go and make something, then you knock down that price to the one who is buying. That is the finance bill and how the government is planning to increase or widen the tax base. And of course here, again, the finance bill tells you something. It tells you where the government is going. In this particular case, there is no tax particularly here on crypto, but it's telling you how the government is going digital and is trying to automate things. In this case, they want the guys who are operating crypto and virtual assets to reveal the user data, meaning the name of this person, their wallet, that means what's inside that account and the profits they are making. And if you don't, and you're operating in Kenya, a penalty of 1 million. And this is according to even the European Union rules. So the government is trying to put a stance of, yeah, we are ready for crypto. And of course, investors will look at this as a good thing. That is the finance bill. And then of course, there will be a little relief, which is sort of an oxymoron, on the pump, because the finance bill proposes to reduce by half the road maintenance levy, which is usually 3 shillings, making it 1 shilling 50 cents. And that would mean after this goes through and everything, you'd find that the pump price will go down 1 shilling 50 cents. So that's just to cushion us amid the crisis that is going on and the macroeconomics, just protect Kenyans. Well, that is the finance bill, and as I told you earlier on, the finance bill is exactly how the government intends to raise money, and the finance appropriation bill is how the government intends to, use that money. And then Kenya Revenue Authority, out of field tax, this is coming for you because your pay as you earn and your VAT tends to give KRA your data. So KRA is saying they want a situation where, because Kelly has pay as you earn, they have my data, they can prompt me directly. So I just accept a prompt instead of manually going to their platform to file my taxes. They can auto do that using my data. So they're trying to get these rules on. Yeah, and that is the finance bill and how the government is trying to raise money to fund that budget right there. Nduh and Aseto.
Of course, Kelly, thank you very much for giving us that update. Of course, we're going to come back to you in a little bit to get a little bit more in terms of information. It's Budget Day 2026, 2027, and it's a special coverage of that through the whole day until the point where the Cabinet Secretary, John Badi, is going to give the presentation before Parliament today in terms of the budget estimates, where the money is going to come from, how it's going to be spent, what is going to be borrowed in debt. And these are some of the numbers that we're looking at today. So we are having that special coverage. It is the Situation Room on KTN this morning, broadcasting simulcast on KTN as well as SpiceFM this morning, so that we can have a breadth and length in terms of what is going on, and of course going in depth into a lot of these numbers. And so what that does is it allows us at 7 o'clock, beyond 7 o'clock, to talk with two economists. Abraham Rugo, yeah. Dr. Abraham Rugo will join us with ex-Iraqi. And we're going to be looking into how exactly this money will be spent, where it's going to come from, and what makes sense economically when we're taking this budget into consideration.
There's something that just came at the tail end of the presentation by Kelly Boss, where Kenya now is looking for new laws and new powers so that they can autofill your returns. And one asked the question, they've always had the data, why not do it? They always subject us to these queues to go file, yet they have the data. I think it would be important as well for KRA to explain to Kenyans why that is important, so that as well you're not taken to court for lack of public participation, because Wananchi as well need to be part and parcel of the process.
Indeed, they do.
Yeah.
All right, so at this point, we're going to take a break and look into the news, and then we'll come back, and ex-Iraqi and Abraham Rugo will be here for us to look into these details, Budget 2026-27 in detail. Don't go away, stay with us.
Mobile and on radio. Facebook at SpiceFM KE. This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
He himself actually has admitted that he bribed members of parliament. So
he admitted that he bribed members of parliament.
Well, when he said
the government,
when he said that he gave the 10 million was for what?
We're always quick to point faults in somebody else before you look at your own faults as a person.
If it was Kanu's day, hii amuka naye leo ungekuwa umeenda bali sana hii. So when we must celebrate you.
There are 600 million people now globally estimated to be living with diabetes in the world. So it is a major health problem. It's the largest single disease rising pandemic that we're dealing with right now.
The Situation Room, Kenya's biggest conversation.
Spice up your life. The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM.
Good morning. This is the News Wire. I'm Leah Ubaga. The 2026-2027 budget, which is expected to be presented to Parliament today by Finance or Treasury Cabinet Secretary John Mbadi, has caught the attention of Kenyans as it is expected to outline the direction of government spending, revenue collection, and strategies to address economic challenges in the coming financial year. The budget will be presented after Parliament approves the revenue and expenditure estimates that will guide its implementations. One of the key issues that will be monitored is how the government will balance development needs with a high burden of public debt. Information presented before the Budget Committee shows that government spending is estimated to reach about 4.8 trillion shillings, while the budget deficit remains a challenge that requires domestic and foreign loans to finance the gap. In addition, citizens and businesses are waiting to see if there'll be new tax measures or revenue collection adjustments without increasing the burden on taxpayers.
Mimi 4 trillion wanasoma hiyo, angalia hawana hiyo pesa. Umelimbikizia kama ni mwananchi kutoa ushuru mingi sana. Like State House, mbona wametenga pesa sijui imefikia mara ngapi. So mimi kama Mkenya nitasema hiyo budget vile inaenda kusoma, inaenda kuumia times 2. Corruption iko juu sana. Maana mtu anaanzisha mradi yenye anajua atakula ndani. Mbona sasa kama saa hii mbolea 18 billion wamedouble times 2. Na hiyo pesa yenye wamedouble hiyo si ati inaenda kwa mbolea, inaenda kwa mifuko ya watu. Sasa hiyo ndio corruption yenye hatutaki.
Naitwa Barak. Wamekuwa na mtindo wa kusoma budget. Na ukiangalia kuitekeleza budget yao sio kikamilifu. Ukiangalia kama ile nyongeza ya pesa inayomeka kwa house, kwa affordable housing, zingine zinajengwa kwa shamba zenye hazina title. Sasa tuelewi umilikaji itakuwa namna gani. Yangu vile tunaelekea wa uchaguzi mkuu, pesa nyingi zitafichwa kwa hizi mabudget. Unasikia ingine imeongezeka, ingine imepunguzwa. Pesa hizi zitaenda kutumika kwa kutafuta kura kwa wananchi. Kenya kiendelea kulia.
The government has been under pressure to increase revenue while avoiding measures that could spark public opposition due to the high cost of living. Overall, the 2027-2026 budget will be an important test of the government's ability to deliver on its agenda of economic growth, job creation, healthcare, education and development projects while controlling the national debt and protecting the welfare of the people. Mbadi's remarks today are expected to provide a full picture of the government's priorities in the new financial year. Opposition leaders are strongly criticizing the budget, calling it an additional burden on the people and perpetuating the government's dependence on loans. The leaders have said that the government's budget of 4.82 trillion shillings has a huge financial gap and that it focuses on spending without considering the current economic situation. Wiper Party leader Kalonzo Musyoka has said that the budget is too big and is focused on unsustainable spending. Kalonzo is urging MPs to use the opportunity to refuse the budget bill, saying that the people are waiting to bribe traitors in parliament who support the people's plan to be economically oppressed.
Now, a direct word to members of parliament as I conclude. You were not elected to be a rubber stamp. A mother woke up before dawn, remember that, queued for hours and marked your name because she believed you would go to Nairobi and fight for her. When you vote to approve 28.4 billion shillings free day secondary capitation shortfall, you vote against the children of the poor.
The opposition is proposing an alternative to the 4.32 shillings budget, saying the plan will help reduce the government's dependence on loans. Kalonzo, who was accompanied by Rigathi Gachagua of the DCP and Justin Muturi of the DP, said the opposition will use constitutional means to ensure the bill is defeated if major amendments are not made to take into account the interests of the citizens. The government has warned hospitals against charging civil servants unauthorized fees as it moves to fully implement a new public officers medical scheme fund tariff framework aimed at standardizing healthcare costs across contracted facilities. Health Cabinet Secretary Aidan Duale said any facility found demanding illegal co-payments from public officers will face immediate sanctions, including suspension and forced refunds, and an enforcement system now backed by locked tariffs agreed with hospitals nationwide. Duale said the government has concluded negotiations with private and faith-based health facilities and has formally locked the POMSF tariff structure into the Social Health Authority system, marking a key shift in the management of civil servants' healthcare benefits. The CS said the reforms follow widespread complaints from public officers over hospital detentions, delayed approvals, and unauthorized payments during the transition to the new health financing framework. That's the Newswire. I'm Leah Ubaga.
Spice FM, Nakuru.
Most people don't know that there's a best battery for your car. And when you don't have exactly the right battery, not all batteries are the same. Make sure you get exactly the right battery for your car with Chloride Exide's super powerful Exide batteries with advanced technology designed for start-stop vehicles. Choose the best for your car. Choose Chloride Exide.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on Spice FM.
Members of parliament, they go to settle, they just promised they get given tea, mandazi, and 100,000. That's not development.
External borrowing, 589 billion. Are we on the same page? What did parliament pass?
If anything happened to our president today, God forbid, that man would become president. Na yeye ndio alilenga hizo stories za Shakahola.
The real thing is our constitution has only one person who is accountable to us.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi. This is the Situation Room.
Good morning once again, and if you're joining us here, this is our special coverage of Budget 2026-2027. This is the Situation Room. Dennis Aseto and Nduh here with you. It's doing it a little bit different this morning, where we simulcast with KTN as we get in depth in terms of what is going to happen over the next 1 year as concerns the country's finances, where you're going to get the money from, how you're going to spend it, and what those numbers look like. So we're getting into the second hour of conversations this morning. And as we do that, we will get a little bit deep into it as two guests join us this morning. Dr. X.N. Iraqi is an economist, joins us this morning. Dr. good morning.
Good morning, how are you?
Very well, thank you.
I am in the World Cup mood.
You're in the World Cup mood?
So when you see you in the US.
Well, let's get through those numbers first of all. Who gave you the visa? That might be another question that we want to ask.
After the broadcast.
After the broadcast, we'll get into those details. Okay. Abraham Rugo is the Executive Director of Budgeti Hub, and he's also here with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning to you.
Karibu sana.
Asante. It's good to
Okay.
be back.
How are you feeling about the numbers so far? I don't know if I want to ask that question because we might not finish. But
yeah. So first of all, the numbers have been shifting, changing. When you look at from the time we had the budget policy statement in February, and now the numbers have been going up, have been shifting. And the interesting piece of that is, of course, you see the shifts in the expenditure, you see the, so that has made me a bit uneasy, particularly because there are things that seem not to be adding up.
Okay.
But we can talk more about that. Yeah, so I'm a bit uneasy.
A little bit uneasy?
A bit uneasy.
Well, Dennis went to the Guinea.
Yes.
And he's got a proverb from the Guineans.
The Guineans.
So we'd love your interpretation of that.
So the Guineans, first of all, have bauxite. Bauxite is a critical mineral that is being used to in the process of manufacturing aluminium. So, Prof, if you go to America, don't say aluminium, say aluminum. Aluminum, yes.
Normally, when I go there, I always talk with the southern rule.
Oh, there you go.
I spend some time in the deep south.
Okay.
So you may even need an interpreter to get what I'm saying.
Yeah, but the problem that we get today from the Guineans, the river never drinks its own water, and the tree never eats its own food. Prof, how would you interpret it?
It just tells us that we are supposed to serve other people. So if you're a river, the water is supposed to be taken by animals, by trees, and so on. If you're a tree, you're supposed to be eaten by human beings, turned into charcoal, and so on. I think the proverb is about service, not being served. But I'm also a bit concerned about your proverbs because I've been coming here for years.
Yeah.
And I've not heard you guys giving me a proverb from Kiambu or from Karachuonyo or from Machakos.
It is coming.
It's coming.
It's in the pipeline.
Thank you.
Yes. Rugo, how would you interpret it?
Yeah, I understand the same. Really, that our lives exist for the benefit of others. Yeah, so there's a lot that we do thinking we are doing it for ourselves, but in reality, it actually serves other people. And the more we are conscious that we actually exist, a big part of our being, whether it's being healthy, just that act of staying healthy, for instance, serves your family's peace. Yeah, so I think we exist for the benefit and for the blessing of others.
I can say that again because the act of staying healthy will equally go into the finance bill and look at what has been allocated to the health sector.
Indeed. Okay, great interpretation. Let's look into these numbers because the second second Thursday, every June, the budget will be read. It's interestingly because this happens across East Africa, happens in Uganda, happens in Tanzania. So everybody's going to get before their respective parliaments and read the budget. If you look at Kenya, we already know what the numbers are looking like, 4.82 trillion shillings, highest ever. But a good chunk of that is 1.1 trillion shillings, which, if we're not speaking economic language, we don't know where we're going to get it from. And what has been attached at the end of that is debt. It's going to be from debt. You will have to borrow that money. Also, a great responsibility has been placed on the shoulders of KRA to then be able to collect some of that money to the tune of 3.8 trillion. So we're going to play around with those numbers this morning and try to figure out in this conversation, where is this money going to come from? The finance bill is what tells us where the money will come from. The appropriations bill says how you're going to spend it. So let's talk about where the money is going to come from.
Good.
Based on what KRA has been able to do in this fiscal year that's coming to an end. We'll start with you, Dr. Rugo.
Yes, thank you.
Where's 4.8 trillion shillings going to come from?
Good. Thank you very much. So let me start by saying that the statement today is a highlight of statement of the budget. The budget was submitted in Parliament on 30th of April. And all the necessary documentation. And for clarity, the Parliament website and the Treasury website has all those documents for any Kenyan who would like to look at them. Where does the money come from? So our budget is financed largely from three sources. And the first source, of course, is what we call ordinary revenue, tax. So that's going to be the biggest portion. That direct tax is where income tax, VAT, value-added tax, import duty, and then excise duty. So that's normally the biggest portion, and of that, income tax, both corporate income tax and personal income tax, is big. And those are the large pieces that KRA, Kenya Revenue Authority, is responsible for collecting. Then the second part of financing is what we call non-tax revenue, or in the language of budgets, appropriation in aid. So appropriation in aid is all the charges, levies, and rates that are paid for services rendered by government. So let me give you an example. You go to NTSA, you need a new driving license, you pay something. You are transferring land from myself to Prof, I pay something. All those monies that are collected by...
that was happening.
Prof, I may just gift you now that you can't make it to the US. So in this particular budget, you're talking about 2.985 trillion coming from the ordinary revenue. You're talking about another 660 coming from the appropriations in aid. Now, then the third part is, if the two, you will have other grants and donations, but they're normally a very small portion. Like this year, we're talking about less than 50 billion. The last portion is when you have a deficit between your expenditure and your revenue of those two pieces, then the difference is what you borrow. So those two first figures are 3.6. We're expecting 3,000. For his use of words, allow me just to use simpler figures. Our budget is around 4,800 Kenya shillings. Those two figures I've talked about is 3,600. Okay. And therefore we have about 1,200, which is the deficit, which is what now you borrow. And if, when you less the donations and the grants, then you will come to about 1.1. So that's how the budget is going to, is planning to be. But it's an important thing I need to say at this particular point. The fact that you have about 660 billion or 660, from my number, 660 shillings that you are charging on different services, yet Kenyans have already paid taxes up front for those very services, means that the cost of accessing public services is actually going up. And the interesting thing that we notice is that appropriation in aid is what actually has been rising fastest. It's the income stream for government that is growing fastest. Income tax is actually declining.
Well, what's an example of a tax that Kenyans have paid up front for which the budget is looking for an extra charge?
Let me give you an example. So, for instance, when you pay for, when you have already paid, so you've paid your income tax, government has already collected money to provide a service called environmental protection, for instance. But when you go to set up your business, you'll have to pay a permit to NEMA.
Okay.
And several of them. There's also tax for transport and transport regulation. But when you go to NTSA, you'll pay for that service. So basically, it means that the more, and it's common to charge across the world, but the more these charges, remember even the ID, the immigration department, whether you're thinking about your passport, whether you're thinking about your renewal of the ID, whether you're thinking about all these, that package of these extra non-tax measures, and then when you come to the county level, for instance, you add permits, business permits, and what have you, is what actually complicates the cost of doing business, is what actually increases the cost of living, because you go to, for instance, your charges for, you bought your car. When you bought that car, you paid import duty.
Yes.
Then when you go to buy fuel, you pay for the price of bringing that fuel. But you have other rates in there that are not taxes. You have, forex adjustment levy, you have petroleum levy, you have railway development levy. When you look at all those levies, are the ones that increase the pump price. And you have also paid VAT on it. So you see what I'm saying? That there are these other extra charges which, the more they grow, as long as they are the ones growing more, remember they are enforceable. Because if you don't pay a fee to NEMA, they will come for you.
Yeah.
If you don't pay your driving license, they will come for you. The police will be there waiting for you on the road, and the like. When you pay for your insurance, you'll pay for excise duty, but you'll also pay for when you pay your bills at the hotel, you'll pay for VAT for that service, but you'll also pay catering levy and tourism development levy.
Yes.
Those are the ones I'm talking about. So And that has been the portion that has been growing fastest, which would explain, just my last point, why the cost of living is going up. Because the cost of doing business is going up in and of itself.
Which then, yes, just
yeah, so no, that's the last point I wanted to make.
Yeah, so Prof, then if we look at all these levies that are growing really fast, making it the cost of living to go high, cost of doing business to go high, one asks the question then, if cost of doing business is high, that means you're closing doors for would-be investors to set up business in the country, or already existing investors would have to restructure their businesses and let people go for them to be able to operate in the country. So with that then, through the new levies, through the new taxes that we see are being introduced, is the government then shooting itself on the leg? Because the number of people that you would be getting taxes from is going down.
Already we can see evidence of that. So anytime you talk about the budget, I always tell Kenyans, read the budget speech in conjunction with the economic survey that is released a few months before. Because it gives you the state of the economy. So if you look at the state of the economy last year, the GDP or the economy declined. The growth rate declined from 4.7 to 4.6. And that confirms what he is, or what he said, and what you're asking, that we don't have people investing, we don't have people consuming because of that. When I come to invest in a country, whether I'm a Kenyan or a foreigner, I want to make money. So if I see I'm not going to make money, I'll leave and go to neighboring countries or alternative countries. And if I'm already in the country, I could, instead of expanding my business, take money to TB, that money to TB or buy boats, so that I don't need to be disturbed by anybody. But let me go back to what he raised, a very important issue about levies. Why is the government focusing on levies? Remember, in 2024, we demonstrated on the streets against taxes. So the government is very clever and realized you don't want taxes, you don't want to pay taxes or more taxes, let's shift to levies. So levies are very easy to institute, and that's why the government is taking that side. Kenyans also don't want the government to incur debt. They don't want you to borrow. People are saying the government should not borrow from China and elsewhere. So the easy play, the low-hanging fruit happen to be levies. And that's why we are being loaded with very many levies. So eroding levies on Kenyans is an easier option, but it has long-term consequences. What you have said, that businesses are not expanding, people are not investing. And if you go to downtown Nairobi today, or you go to where we have informal sector, people are really suffering. Because those levies don't discriminate, everybody pays them.
Yeah.
And as I've always argued that money in our pockets is more prudently utilized than money in the government. So that's the problem we are facing. And the other thing you need to remember, and my friend should have mentioned that, is apart from levies, the government doesn't want to borrow, doesn't want to put more taxes. That's why the government is moving towards PPP projects, private-public partnership projects. It's also moving towards securitization. But what we should be discussing at this forum is not so much how to raise the money, how to spend it. It should be how do we accelerate the economic growth, because that is a secret weapon in our quest to make this country more economically productive.
And how do we accelerate economic growth? Yes.
Economic growth is not driven by the government, it's driven by you and me. So anybody who is producing in this country, whether you are particular entrepreneurs, particularly investors, we should give them incentives in the budget. So that if I have a small business employing 5 people, I can employ 20 people. If I have a business that is covering 1 county, it can cover 20, 30 counties. The biggest problem in the country today is unemployment. And you cannot now load businesses with levies and levies. They close, then you have no businesses. Yeah. And the problem of closing businesses or not attracting investors, you actually get less taxes. And that's what he said, that if you look at taxes going down, that's why you're focusing on levies. So we should strike a balance. Because at the end of the day, I want economic growth. 10% is my target.
Yeah. Aseto, let me just add to that, the way to make sure the economy grows is make sure that money is circulating in the pockets of people. Because for an economy to grow, you need to up production, but you also need to up consumption. The things I have just explained, including now with heightened crisis, and the Strait of Hormuz now, Iran says it's permanently now closed, as of yesterday, as of this morning rather, is that all these when so much money is not circulating, it means that there is nobody to consume goods and services. When the things I have just talked about and Prof has added in terms of the cost of living, in terms of the cost of goods, it means two things. One, because incomes are not improving. From 2020, real incomes have actually been going down. And I dare anybody to just look at their own salaries, you know, and look at how much you could afford in 2019 and what you can afford today, and factoring in inflation. And you see, the discussion that inflation, which is now going up, by the way, inflation has started going up again. Inflation is the increase in the cost of basic goods, how they're expanding. The fact that they expanded at 4% last year does not mean they did not expand. They only expanded with a smaller margin than 8%, than 9% where they were. So which means year on year, the cost of accessing basic goods and services and food is going up. Last year it went up, but by a smaller margin, but it's still going up, it's still compounding. But salaries and real incomes are not going up. And therefore what that means is that the money within the economy is not circulating. But let me come to public debt. And Prof, if you allow me, I would still put public participation, I work a lot on that. Public-private partnerships and securitization, they all need to be part of debt. As of now, they are not considered as part of debt stock.
Why?
Add pending bills.
I'm coming to that.
One would imagine that the debt is described as something that's owed.
As of now, the reason for that is, and that's why there's an argument that they are not part of debt. But remember, every public-private partnership is guaranteed by government. The private investor will not go at a loss. If today Kenyans decided none of them will use the expressway, the one who built the expressway will not lose their money. Turkana wind project, we've not consumed a lot of the power from there. True. But we are still paying. So the SGR, it's not once, it's not twice we have put in money. So the investor will never lose. So I consider it part of debt, and I'm pushing that needs to be included as part of the total debt stock. All the guarantees to the state corporations, the same ones that actually charge. But let me finish my thought process. That because of all these demands of government, and I'm still not convinced that government does not want to borrow more, because when you look at it right now, we are talking about 1.1 trillion or 1,100 of deficit that needs to be borrowed. But that is a figure as of now. Last year, let me give you an example. Last year we started with 900. We are ending the financial year at 1,100. The deficit has increased. Borrowing domestically is going to be now 90%. 90% of these 1.1, about 950 billion, is going to be borrowed domestically. What does that mean? Because I want to add it why the economy is not growing. It means that government is actually competing and out-competing, out-maneuvering everybody else in the domestic credit market. But the interesting thing is that now it's accessing credit at a cheaper rate. So when the CBR comes down, government will access it at 10%, because the CBR now is 8.7. It was retained at 8.75% by the monitoring policy committee yesterday, the day before yesterday. But for you go try to take a loan for your company or for you as an individual, the banks will shoot you at 17%.
But we know already that for any economy-facing government, that this domestic borrowing should actually be saved for MSMEs, those who are building. They are the ones who actually build an economy.
Precisely.
So when we look at a budget being built, should we not be leaving that money towards the infrastructure and manufacturing that the Cabinet Secretary will mention today? Should that money not be ring-fenced for the actual economy builders in any budget?
Precisely. And unfortunately, the sectors that you see there is no much growth in terms of investment is actually manufacturing. Our contribution, manufacturing as a contribution to the GDP, and we can check in the economic survey, it's important that Prof raised it up, is actually not growing. Yet that is where the productive sector, where you actually can employ, because Kenya, as it is, we are still going to depend on human labor. it is the only way to get people out of poverty. When you are talking about 40% poverty rate, when you're talking about 7 out of every 10 between 15 and 35 are out of work, the only way to get that moving is to make sure they have work.
Yes.
And the investment, you're right, it should be in ensuring that MSMEs have loans. You know, when you look at, for instance, the total money that is being said is being given to the youth, it's just about 15 billion shillings.
Right.
Whether you think about Nyota, you think about, I checked the report, but they're just about 15 billion or thereabout. That's a very small amount when you think about the millions you are thinking. Yet, employment will not be created by giving money to Aseto. Employment will be created by ensuring there are industries that can absorb Aseto and 20 others and 30 others and across different value chains. And I keep asking, where did the value chains go? The 7 of them, the Kenya Kwanza, so because if you don't attack it from all these different angles, it becomes a thing of Nyota, gather people in a public stadia, give them 25,000, half of it goes, they go to buy phones or whatever, treat themselves, and they, in the argument of if my money cannot solve my problems, I better eat it, and then at the end of the day, you cannot show what businesses have been established. And assuming the businesses are established, you still need a consumption chain that actually can demand these services. So right now, demand is actually suppressed.
Yeah. Now, Prof, we know credit is the lifeline of any MSME or any investor out there. And when you look at even whatever government wants to borrow over 900 billion shillings locally, that would mean that, first of all, the question is, when we borrow locally, is the interest rate higher as compared to when we borrow externally?
It's usually higher. It's usually lower, higher when you borrow locally.
Locally, that means,
and that's why there was a
local debt is expensive.
It's expensive.
Yes. It's expensive.
That's why everybody wanted to go to Euro bonds and so on, where the interest rate was lower.
Yes. So with that in mind, then we look at a situation where the government wants to expand its tax base, but then again, it is as well borrowing locally that is blocking the expansion of the same. We look at the already existing debt that has not been included, where even IMF today is saying, please go back and fix your books before you come back so that we can talk about the actual debt that does exist. So in terms of funding this budget, right, with everything else that is there and economic experts that have spoken, including the government experts, why is it seemingly difficult to just do what one would say is basic of economics if you want to get more?
Rephrase your question.
Why is it seemingly that the government then, with everything that does exist, does not want to do that which is considered to be basics of economics? Don't borrow locally.
It is all politics. Let me give you a background before I answer your question. If you look at the current budget estimates, we have 4.8 trillion. Only 840 of that money is good development. Why is the rest of the money going?
Current expenditures.
So if you want to do what you are saying, you need to reduce the recurrent expenditure. That would mean giving counties less money. You know the political consequences. Having less government employees, you know what are the consequences, particularly with 2027 in mind. So I think every person, every politician, every leader knows the correct economics. But politics crowd that. For example, you are saying that local debt is very expensive. Everybody knows that.
Yes.
So what is the alternative to debt? We can borrow.
Yes.
But Kenyans don't want to borrow. So as a politician, you always play safe. And that's why you find a lot of political decisions that do not make economic sense. But they make political sense. And what I'm looking for are politicians who are very bold. They'll say, this does not make political sense. Even if it means me losing presidency or losing my parliamentary seat next year, but I make sure that things in this country are right, I will do that. But we have politicians who are that bold. We don't. So we need to such bold politicians. Now, before I finish, let me go back to a very important question he asked and you asked and he addressed, economic growth. One of the ways to make economic growth is to make sure that people are optimistic. They will consume more, they will invest more. But I'm concerned by the level of pessimism in this country. Get into a tax, just get into a tax and get into a conversation with the tax driver. Go to the Komba or the SMEs, informal sector, and talk to those people. They are very pessimistic. Yeah. Talk to the businessmen, they are very, very pessimistic. So I think the government needs, in addition to improving the infrastructure, in addition to making sure that there are less levies and the cost of living goes down, we need to be made more optimistic. But very important, if you want the economy to grow, let the people who can multiply that money get it. The SMEs, small businesses, and business people. Because the government does not do any business. That's what we need to remember. Business, investing, entrepreneurship is by all of us. And those are the people who should be getting money. So when the government now starts competing with SMEs and businesses and industries to get money from banks, we are not doing the right thing. Finally, again, I always remind you, read the economic survey. Because one of the things that surprised me about that economic survey, surprisingly, is the amount of liquidity in banks. Surprisingly. Because people don't want to borrow. Why? The economy is not performing very well. Why should I borrow that money? And that's why optimism is very important. Why the economy did so well during Kibaki era is that he never did any magic. He just made us feel good and optimistic about tomorrow. So we borrowed. You remember banks having kiosks on the streets?
Oh yes, they would come to.
Because we are very optimistic. So that is what politicians are supposed to do. Make us optimistic about tomorrow. We shall borrow, we shall invest, and the economy will grow.
Obviously, we know what the law says constitutionally, where Kenya can draw the lines in terms of borrowing and what it's supposed to be for. So I'm a bit concerned, and maybe it's from a lack of knowledge point of view. Rugo, if we say that 1.1 trillion must be borrowed after the grants and all of those things are taken into consideration, and we know that about 900 billion of that will come from the domestic market, which is a more expensive loan, because the external loans are coming at about 2-3%. Can you trace where the 900 billion shillings will actually go?
Good question. So that's where now that's where it gets very complicated, because a lot of our local borrowing is going to finance our normal running of government. It's not going to any specific project. That's a fact. We borrow to refinance. So we issue a T-bill and refinance a bond. We issue a T-bill, transfer money to counties. I suspect even sometimes, and the reason why I say that is because when you do the math and look at the expenditure, you look at just quick math. So you have about 2,800, in terms of expenditure. When you look at the entirety of our must pay, we are talking about 1.5. But the fact is that when you add redemptions, it's actually 2.5. About 2,500. If you add counties, it's 420. Already, you add 5720. Thereabout. You already passed 5 trillion. If you add just those, if you must pay the redemption is a principle. If the people who have given you money come and say we want our principal, and you have to pay, and they always put it in the books. It's the one figure that is always contested. So the budget is this, and then there's another figure that is slightly up. Then you have a revenue of 3,600. Already it says that for you to provide all the other services, you need about some other 2,000 or 2 trillion. Now, because of that, it means that all the money you are borrowing, a lot of it is just going to pay teachers, to deal with different other expenses. By the time you come to do, the beauty about the external borrowing, a lot of the external borrowing is that it's pegged. Today we can continue fighting to get the SGR documents because we know the money that was borrowed was pegged to SGR.
Yes.
But when you come to the Eurobonds, they are not pegged to anything specific. They are just, they are borrowing to come and, finance the budget. The goal would be, and we have pushed this to Parliament to say, we know so much has been borrowed, at least from the books. Can we align it to specific projects that were done? Because part of the reason why we are so in debt distress, hence my red, is that you cannot trace what projects we have done with the money. And therefore, the projects are not giving us any return on investment, as it were, including the guaranteed loans, because there are monies we have taken as loans and guaranteed Kenya Pipeline, and guaranteed Kengen, and Kenya Airways, and guaranteed all these same state corporations. Not to mention, they're the same state corporations that account for about 80% of the pending bills. They're the ones not paid. Yeah? So we have said we want to see the projects that you are doing with the money that you are borrowing. And for me, therefore, the concern for domestic borrowing is twofold. One, the interest rate is too high. Two, you actually cannot trace it for where it has been spent.
And Rugo, I think before you even proceed then, we know exactly like you've said, we borrowed SGR money to finance SGR. We can see it. Whether we are seeing return on investment is another question.
Correct.
Right?
Correct.
But is there express orders or requirement that even when we are borrowing locally, it ought to be pegged to a project?
So there's no express for borrowing or externally or internally. What the law says is that all borrowing is for capital expenditure. Just to change it from development, because I find the development word, I think everything is development. Even a teacher going to class is also participating in development. So for capital expenditure. And the reason for that is that you are investing in something that will give you a return. So you're borrowing to put up a mango industry, a mango processing plant. That mango processing plant will spur the economy. You're borrowing to put up a road, that opens up parts of the country, or an SGR that moves goods. Now, our SGR seems to move more goods in than it moves out, which is corroborated by our exports numbers. We have more coming in. Our stabilization of the the forex seems to be more to facilitate import than export. So for me, we have not reached there. And that is why we are, even part of the Okoh Uchumi campaign that I'm part of, we are saying we want every project tied to its source of money. And this has been, the reason why it never moves is what baffles me. Uhuru Kenyatta, when he was Minister for Finance and Deputy Prime Minister, came up with e-promise. E-promise was to do a very basic thing. It was to tie every project to its source of money.
But why is that so difficult? I must interject, and then maybe we can why is that so difficult to do?
Why?
Because when you go to ask for the funds, essentially, there is a reasoning, and there's a lot of policy documentation, and there's a lot of work and number crunching that goes behind it when people fly off to wherever it is that they go. There is a reason for which this money is being given. Why would it be so difficult then to peg the project to the source of funds?
Before I answer that question, let me make it more dramatic.
Okay, here we go.
All of you, I'm sure you have borrowed some money.
Yes.
Now, when I borrow money, I always tie that money to a specific project.
Yes.
Borrow money to build a house, to buy a car, maybe to plant trees. Individuals always tie their money, particularly borrowed money, to specific projects because they want to see the future returns. Yes. But in government, it does not happen that way for a very simple reason: politics. So occasionally you see our political leaders go to a political rally and say, we are going to build a road here, we are going to build this here. So if you tie money to the projects, as he is putting it, where will that room for maneuver come, particularly with 2027 coming? So because of politics, that's why you never tie money you borrow to specific projects. Because as a politician, you must always appease to your constituents, to your voters. That's the reason. There's politics, not because of economics. But I wish that could happen because it will make a very big difference. Remember, at the end of the day, there's one statistic I never see in our budget, I never saw in economic survey unless you saw it, productivity. We want to make this economy more productive. We want to make everybody more productive.
We never measure it.
That's why you want to build roads. That's why you want to use. That's why you want to use more IT, more automation, so the economy can be more productive. If it becomes more productive, it expands and will create jobs for young men and women. So it's all politics. That's why we don't tie specific projects to specific money that is borrowed.
But Prof, even while at that, we are borrowing using stipulated law.
Yeah.
Right? It is the law that then demands that everything you borrow is tied to a specific project. Whilst we can talk about politics, there is the law. So what I'm hearing us say then, it is intentional breaking of the law because we can run away with it because we are playing politics. But that notwithstanding, Prof, as well, while we look at projects have not been tied to, funds have not been tied to projects yet you're still borrowing. We can't equally talk about funding the budget and not talk about wastage that we see on a daily basis. Because the wastage and corruption that we see in government today is actually denying the very same government to do the projects that they tell Kenyans on a daily basis, tutatengenezea barabara kutoka Kotulo, Mudogashe, hapo kwa hiyo kona. It is because of the wastage that we see that we are unable to do that. So if today, say, we seal wastage and corruption in government, what are we likely to see in the economy?
In fact, we are bringing the issue of wastage too late in this program. It should have been the starting point. Because if you don't want people to pay, if you don't want to borrow, if you don't want to pay to people, if you want more taxes, you don't want to borrow, you don't want more levies, the best alternative is to reduce your expenditure. And you cannot reduce expenditure in health or in education, because that's very critical. But you can reduce expenditure in corruption. I've always said that one former president stood in public and gave us the amount of money that is wasted in this country.
2 billion.
And nobody has ever publicly denied that. So if we can reduce this wastage, corruption, nepotism, duplication of duties, all these debates about debt, about levies would be reduced. And I've always given a very simple example. I drive a Vitz because that's what I can afford and because of petrol. And I've always wondered, why can the government drive Vitz? Have you ever seen a Vitz GK or a Vitz County? So why can't we reduce such wastes? The roads in Kenya, in Nairobi, are very good because that's where the government is. So the government would be very comfortable driving a Vitz. And nobody said that a big car is a status, is a symbol of status. There are people who have a lot of power and they drive very small cars. So if we can reduce such waste, there are a lot of duties that are done by the county and done by the government. So such wastes in cars and other expenses would definitely give a lot of savings. And you probably realize that you don't need even to increase the taxes. You don't need to increase the levies. Number two is, why are we having more levies coming up? Yet, with IT, services are becoming cheaper. I used to go and queue to get driving license some years ago. Nowadays, I get from my house. So why should it be expensive? So I agree with you that waste is one area we must target. But the question that comes is, do we have the political will to target corruption, to target nepotism, to target waste? If we had that political will, and I say it again, such that I can make decisions today that will sacrifice my MP, my women rep, my presidency next year, this country will change. But as long as we don't have that political will, we shall be talking about this in 2037.
And that explains why there is no energy to deal with the government-owned enterprises. Entities, really, many of them are not enterprises. There's no energy. You remember, it must be the KEPSA team and Abdikadir that wrote the report in 2015 on what needed to be done with this over 200 government. Since then, they have actually increased in number. You know, the other day we were just running, like looking through even the funds, the separate funds from the consolidated fund. We have upwards of almost 80 funds, that don't have the. So that tells you that this becomes then the political space where you reward. And interestingly, in the budget, all we see is a transfer. It's normally one line, transfer to other government agencies. 10 billion, 20 billion, 15 billion, and when you put that money together, you are talking of almost a third of our budget is actually going to those entities. When you corroborate with the numbers, assuming the president did not tell us whether Sunday and Saturdays were included, of the 2 billion, you're talking of about 700 billion. That's almost equivalent to your deficit and the entire budget that is given to the state corporations.
And the budget for development.
And the budget for development. So are you saying everything you borrow, it's actually what you borrow? And you see, so without dealing with corruption and the theft of public resources, because I think we give it very lousy names, it's just theft of public resources, Without dealing with that, it means that you're expanding the budget, but every extra shilling in this budget, every extra collection in this budget will, first of all, go to repaying debt, which we are saying we need to ask questions about, including who is being paid to. But more importantly, you are also then saying the rest of the money will actually get lost. And that's when now you start seeing we have delays in capitation, we have delays in sending medicine and buying drugs, we have delays in critical. I think even I think some point we wanted our armed men to buy their own lunch, to pay for their own food in the barracks, and the like. So you have all those things happening not because you don't have money. I think it's important for us to make it very clear. It's not that we don't have money. Our revenue has actually been growing, even in this constrained environment, average 10% year on year. Very few Kenyans have had their salary grow with 10% year on year. Our taxation, our contribution is going up year on year at 10%. So it's not that you don't have money. And I think it's in this show I said we don't have a revenue problem. Yeah. Never had. But without dealing with corruption, and without dealing with how you prioritize, and because the budget we are talking right now is an election budget, it's a campaign budget. All the things you see in there are largely targeted at making sure, we are re-elected.
The hope also is that folks are using data and information to inform decisions, and that this budget statement is a decision that didn't start last week. It started on the 30th of August, 2025. Correct. In order to have this done. Yeah. The things that you speak of, Auditor General's report, is actually coming out from monies that have been spent or not spent in the year before. So why would you then have a budget statement that includes your appropriations as well as your finance bill on mistakes that we can have already seen that have been made?
Because there's no energy to deal with them. It is not, to use Prof's word, the politics, and the politics is not always a bad thing. It's politics of appropriation for private gain, because what else drives corruption, but also a citizenry that also needs, I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday and he told me perhaps we don't need electoral reforms, we need citizen reforms. A citizenry that actually does not expect its member of parliament to go and push for oversight, but actually expects the handouts over the weekend. A citizenry that will not ask this politician whose salary we can guess, we can know. We know. If you need to check, you can check and you can find out. Comes with money bags for sports, over the weekend, does not question. So that there is almost an implicit expectation that the goal of going into government is to bring money. So a bad politician is the one who does not bring money back. Yeah. A good politician, at least hakuli peke yake, he eats with it. Because I think that is what is really driving the corruption. All these monies for campaign, it's not campaigns to put billboards on the or posters. It's not money. It's mobilization money, facilitation money. Attendance money, heckling money, booing money, silence money, whatever you want done, you pay for it. But why is it that we as citizens seem to have accepted that as a way of life, and therefore we do not demand from our, because if I have come and I've given you money, tomorrow you cannot ask me to do my job. But I tell you, but where do you think that money came from?
Paid for it.
I pay for it. I brought you something. So for me, that accountability has to start from even the citizens demanding, that we need a better Kenya. We need a better country. Because unless somebody is asking those questions and enforcing, because law enforcement is really the challenge. We can go around, but unless we enforce the law, unless we demand for accountability, we will be here again. Next year we'll come and talk about a 5.5 trillion budget, and all of us then go home and are frustrated. We now start going through our own depression and hoping it will not get worse than this. Yeah. But the reality is these things.
That's Prof, many are asking the question, the budget 2026-2027, is it monarchy friendly? Why? Because you look at the levies that have been introduced, say sugarcane, levies that have been introduced on sugarcane, you're transporting it as well. You talk about the new rules on registering your mobile phone when you buy it. You look at the gig economy as well in there. And Mwananchi are asking, is this Mwananchi friendly? Or what would inform a budget to be Mwananchi friendly?
Let me take you back to economic survey. And it's always very important to emphasize to Kenyans that always read the two documents to Kenyans.
Yes.
What I found in the economic survey is that 51% of Kenya's GDP or Kenya's economy is service-based. That's where money is made. So if that is where money is made, the government will follow that.
Okay.
That's why you are seeing those taxes about buying mobile phones, transport, things like the gig economy. That's where the money is. So the government is saying, this is where you are making money, let me also get a piece of it in terms of taxes. Now, why is the economy not mwananchi friendly? Very simple. People did not go to the gig economy, they did not go to the informal sector because that was their dream.
It's true.
If you talk to young boys and girls in high school, nobody will tell you that my dream is to become an entrepreneur or to be a writer, to be paid to write papers for students in other parts of the world. Nobody wants to do that. People want a formal job where you have a pension, you are assured of health, and so on. But the gig economy, but the economic reality, which we have discussed today, because the environment is not conducive enough for us to expand the formal enterprises. 80% of the economy has remained formal. So most people, 80% are in the formal sector. So if they are there because they have no choice, and then you follow them, then you cannot say that the budget is mwananchi friendly. Because they are saying, we have already been squeezed by circumstances to be in the informal sector. Now you are following us. That's why people are very pessimistic. That's why you are finding liquidity in banks, people don't want to borrow. And that's why you are seeing some people now leaving the city and going to the countryside because they are saying the city has become too hot. Let me go and relax in the countryside and see where there are opportunities. But as Kenyans, we are not supposed to give up because this is our country. I believe what Rugo is saying is very simple. We need to participate in the affairs of this country. Don't just vote. Follow up your MP, your MCA, your women rep after you vote them in. Because politicians, if you don't punish politicians, they will do what they want. And you can punish them in two ways, vote them out. And the other way is, when they come for a political rally, they are giving money, don't pick the money. If Kenyans stop picking money from politicians, they stop following politicians just because they are being given money, it will make a very big difference. If I'm a politician today, and I go call a political rally and nobody turns up, I'm sure I even return money that I was stolen. But that's a dream. I don't think
and arrest people.
And arrest people.
Yeah.
From all indications, I mean, lastly, the finance bill will probably sail through and will become an act. 1st of July, we're probably going to kick all of this into play. Does it look a little bit more, the forecast is that it looks a little bit more difficult for Kenyans going forward. Is that already established?
Yeah. I think the biggest nightmare of the finance bill is not even so much what it will collect. Because when you look at and I'm waiting to hear the CS, but our estimation is that you're not going to collect an extra of more than 120 billion using the finance bill for 2026. It's a very small amount. The biggest nightmare in that finance bill is a compliance burden it's going to introduce to households. If the provisions for KRA to be able to raid and even pre-populate, for instance, your tax upfront. So when you go to file your returns, you find that a figure has already been put for you there. It's you to prove that actually that's not the figure you should be paying. It will create a lot of complication. And the reason why I say that is that it only creates complication for those who are already in the tax bracket. So what does that do? It creates a lot of people the desire to make sure you stay out of the tax bracket. And how do you do it? You don't formalize anything. Because the formalizing is like the beginning of your death in terms of your business and all that. That compliance nightmare, I think, is going to be very, very tough and very, very rough. And to some extent, I think unfair. Two, with the levies and all these things growing, they are regressive. Because as Prof said, they do not discriminate whether you earn the same or you earn more or you earn less. The fees are the same. Whether you earn 1,000 shillings or I earn 1,000,000 shillings, we pay the same amount for driving license renewal. Yeah, so it's regressive in that sense, because then you're being punished if you don't have an income. For me, those are the big concerns. But bottom line, I think the bigger portion of the money is already what the taxes the laws already have in place. As you can see, it's already 2.9 trillion, and it's how we spend that money that really, for me, makes a big difference. Thanks.
Well, why these Statements will be made, the budget will be read, finance bill may go through, become the Finance Act, the appropriations bill then comes through, all of this will happen. But for Kenyans to be aware of what is happening, the underlings of this conversation, extremely important for us. It will be interesting to see what happens come July 1st and how this actually plays out on Kenya's economy. But we want to thank you, gentlemen, for joining us to have this conversation. Dr. X and Iraqi economist Abraham Rugo has the last thing.
One last thing. Remember, you have your member of parliament and they have not voted for the budget. The budget is still under discussion on the floor of the House. So you still can petition. You still can ask questions. 2024 showed us that you actually can push even to the last point.
Yes. Right.
Yeah, so people should not feel like, now we are cornered, the life has ended, let them do what they want to do. I think people should still write to their members of parliament. They should still ask the hard questions because something needs to happen and something needs to give thanks.
Expect lots of supplementary budgets. I'm sure that's one way to deal with the budget once led. And number 2, levies, taxes. Put music to account, you get more milk. Treat Kenyan taxpayers well, you get more taxes.
Absolutely. Dr. X and Iraqi economist. Dr. Abraham Rugo, Executive Director of Budgeti Hub. Thank you very much for joining us this morning. It's the Situation Room. We'll take another break here now. And also to let you know, as we come back from that break, our reporter Kelvin Nyakundi is on ground to let us know exactly what's going on. It's Budget Day 2026, 2027 that year. And as we get into those details, he'll be on ground to give us an update of what's going on in his neck of the woods. And we'll come back and continue with the conversations on the Situation Room. Simulcast with KTN this morning on a special coverage of the budget. Nduh and Dennis with you this morning. We'll be back after this. Stay with us.
Spice up your life. The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM.
Good morning. This is the News Wire. I'm Leah Ubaga. In every budget, they are the biggest beneficiaries and also those who are left with questions due to what they've been allocated. The 2026-2027 budget is no different. While some sectors have seen an increase in their allocations, others have found themselves receiving less than their expectations as the burden of financing government spending continues to fall on the taxpayer. In our series of reports highlighting the 2026-2027 budget estimates, our reporter Suleiman Kagwe looks at the winners and the losers in the distribution of public funds.
Mshindi mkubwa zaidi katika bajeti ya mwaka huu ni sekta ya elimu. Serikali imependekeza kutenga shilingi bilioni 767 kutoka shilingi bilioni 702.7 katika mwaka 2025-26, ongezeko la takriban shilingi bilioni 64.3. Ndani ya sekta hiyo, Tume ya huduma kwa walimu TSC imeongezewa mgao wake kutoka shilingi bilioni 387.2 mwaka uliopita hadi shilingi bilioni 422.9 mwaka huu, ongezeko la shilingi bilioni 35.7. Sekta ya afya pia ni miongoni mwa walionufaika. Mgao wake umeongezeka hadi shilingi bilioni 175.5. Fedha hizo zinatarajiwa kufadhili utekelezaji wa mfumo mpya wa afya, huduma za afya msingi na mifuko ya magonjwa sugu. Kwa upande wa utawala wa mashinani, kwa mara ya kwanza katika historia ya Kenya, wazee wa mitaa wanatarajiwa kunufaika na posho ya serikali ya shilingi 3,000 kila mwezi kuanzia Julai mwaka huu. Hii ni baada ya bunge kuidhinisha mgao wa shilingi bilioni 3.5 katika bajeti ya mwaka wa fedha 2026-27. Lakini si kila mmoja ametoka akiwa mshindi. Tume huru ya uchaguzi na mipaka IEBC imeendelea kueleza wasiwasi kuhusu maandalizi ya uchaguzi mkuu wa mwaka 2027. Tume hiyo imekadiria kuhitaji shilingi bilioni 61.7 kwa kipindi cha miaka mitatu, ikiwemo shilingi bilioni 25.4 katika mwaka 2026 na 27 pekee. Hata hivyo, kutokuwepo kwa uhakika upatikanaji wa fedha hizo kwa wakati kumeibua hofu kuhusu maandalizi ya uchaguzi huo, na huenda aliyebeba mzigo mkubwa zaidi ni mwananchi wa kawaida. Bajeti ya mwaka huu imefikia takriban shilingi trilioni 4.7 kutoka shilingi trilioni 4.2 mwaka uliopita. Wakati huo serikali inatarajia kukusanya zaidi ya shilingi trilioni 3.5 kupitia ushuru na mapato mengine ya ndani, huku ikitarajia kuziba pengo lililobaki kupitia mikopo. Hii ina maana kwamba walipa ushuru wataendelea kubeba jukumu kubwa la kufadhili matumizi ya taifa. Wachambuzi wa uchumi wanasema bajeti haiwezi kupimwa kwa ukubwa wa fedha zilizotengwa pekee, bali kwa namna inavyobadilisha maisha ya wananchi na kutoa huduma bora kwa wakati. Katika bajeti ya mwaka 2026 na 27 kuna walionufaika kupitia ongezeko la mgao wa fedha na kuna waliosalia wakisubiri majibu kuhusu mahitaji yao. Lakini kwa mwananchi wa kawaida, swali linabaki kuwa lile lile. Je, fedha hizi zitatafsiriwa kuwa huduma bora na nafuu ya maisha au zitabaki kuwa takwimu kwenye karatasi za bajeti?
A major reshuffle has hit the senior command of Kenya's elite security units after Inspector General of the National Police Service Douglas Kanja approved the immediate redeployment of several senior gazetted officers. According to an official communication, the changes are aimed at strengthening operations and enhancing efficiency within specialized units of the National Police Service. Leading the changes is Assistant Inspector General Johanna Kiplagat Tunui, who has been moved from the Kenya Police Service Directorate of Operations to become the new commandant of the General Service Unit, one of the country's premier security formations. In a related move, Assistant Inspector General Frederick Egesa Nyongesa has been transferred from the GSU to serve as the unit's deputy commandant. The reshuffle also affects the service internal oversight structures. Assistant Inspector General Paul Maingo Mumo has been redeployed from the Directorate of Quality Assurance to take over as Director of the Internal Affairs Unit, the body responsible for investigating misconduct within the police service. And finally, the Kenya National Highways Authority has extended by 10 days the deadline for transporters applying for exemption permits following a surge in applications after the restoration of its online permit system. The extension is aimed at easing delays and allowing the authority to clear a growing backlog of applications while optimizing system performance. That's the Newswire. I'm Leah Ubag.
.5 Spice FM, Kisumu.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on Spice FM.
Every time he kept on saying he wants a vibrant opposition.
How does it make sense that public money has been used already and then they dare to sell it back to you? Why are they not giving them for free?
That's how broken we are. That's how broken we are.
They are being sent home now for fees. They're going to fail to prepare. We are compromising the futures of these children.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day. Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
And thank you for watching. Welcome back. This is Kenya's biggest conversation, the Situation Room. It is a simulcast. Today we're doing things differently. We are at the KTN studios. We continue with the coverage of the budget statement 2026-2027 that will be given by the Cabinet Secretary FCPA John Mbadi a little bit later. But even as we continue with the conversations, I want us to go straight to the CBD where Calvin Nyakundi from the business desk is at. Good morning, Calvin. How are you? Today we expect the budget statement to be given to Kenyans a little bit later. But what's the mood like? What's new from where it is you are?
All right, good morning, Aseto. It's nice to hear from you this morning. Coming to you live, of course, from the CBD, but on the side of Parliament buildings. I'm just standing at the roundabout leading to Parliament, and a couple of activities here and there. People are moving to work as normal. I've spoken to some people today. Many people actually don't know that this is budget day, but we had to remind them it is budget day. So a couple of activities here and there. And remember, today we'll be a couple of hours from now, we'll be expecting the Cabinet Secretary for Treasury, that is John Mbadi, to be heading to his offices, that is the Treasury offices, which is like maybe 300 meters from this particular place where I'm standing from. And at 2:30, he'll be heading to Parliament in order for him to just present the budget 2026-2027 to the legislators and also to Kenyans at the end of the day, in order for us to just get what are the projections in terms of what ministries are getting, and in terms of what really is this budget going to be speaking about. And remember, maybe a difference in this year's budget. In a couple of years ago, when the budget was being presented, we would wait for at least that time when the CS is reading it in order for us to know even the money that is supposed to be there. Remember, this one is a bit different. We've gotten the estimates earlier. We've gotten to understand what the budget is all about. So remember also the new taxes that have being put in place, especially in the finance bill, government borrowing levels. We would want to know about that and their impact on interest rates and infrastructure and energy investments as well. So this day is a beehive of activities. It is a bit cold, but later in the day we're expecting at least the sun to come out a bit in order for us to at least feel some warmth. But we are just anticipating for what will happen later in the day. Remember, we have our reporters stationed at Treasury, around the CBD on the other side, and also Parliament buildings inside. We'll also be having guests who will be coming and speaking to us, tax experts, economists, about what this day is expecting to look like. We'll also be speaking to legislators over here who are going to be coming into Parliament in order for us to just understand what they are also expecting. And later on in the day, in the afternoon, after the budget is read, we will be getting the reactions of Kenyans on this other side of town and also from their legislators. And a bit on the numbers, remember we looked at this week we've been looking at the numbers and their ministries and what they've been allocated. And I know Kelly Boss is standing by to let us understand, of course, what is there and also what the ministries are getting and which are the winners and the losers as well. So Aseto, we'll just be getting to talk to Kenyans around and also getting to talk to legislators and understand what they are expecting on this day.
For that, but even while at that, there is a statement that was given by the Principal Secretary, Nduh.
So as the country prepares for the unveiling of the budget for the financial year 2026-2027, Treasury Principal Secretary Kipto did have this to say earlier. Let's go into crossover and listen in.
That impact on increase of household income is not something that you can say you can do quickly. But you can see a lot of effort we have made, for instance, through the housing program. How many jobs have been created? There are quite a number that have been created. Those jobs were not there, but they are there now. So a number of Kenyans have opportunities. My minister will be presenting and probably use this chance also to appreciate John Mbadi. As a PS in charge of National Treasury, he has come in and has been very, very helpful in reaching out to Kenyans, communicating, and we've been doing a lot of the backroom work. Then he does a lot of explanations, and I think he has done a great job to that extent.
All right, so then, of course, taking in that statement from the PS Treasury, Bonakipto, we're going to cross over now back to Kelly Boss, who will give us more of what the budget looks like in numbers. Kelly?
Well, we are going to look, thank you so much, Nduh. And of course, that is Chris Kipto talking about creating jobs. But Nduh, when I give this back to you and Aseto, I'd like you to ask the experts if creating informal jobs helps the government collect more taxes. But let's just look at the allocations right now. And in the macroeconomics comparison, compared to last year and this year, remember, this here is a proposed number. The 4.82 is a proposed number. Last year it was 4.2. It ended up being 4.6. Now it's 4.8. I don't know if XN can explain to us how far up that number can go eventually. But that's just what it looks like. And we have talked about this. It has grown by 2.7%, especially right now leading to the election. There's a lot of fiscal discipline. You'd see that the stance of this particular budget, as I explained, different sectors, it's looking to fund different projects that will help into the election. For example, the IBC gets a huge chunk and stuff like those. Of course, security apparatus gets a lot because they say they're improving intelligence and modernizing the equipment and everything, but think about it, they need to fund also the police. But that's the stance of this budget, leading towards the economic election period. Now, to start us off, of course, we have that's just the bigger number that we've talked about, but I'd like to go straight to election, who are always the biggest winners, and it shows it's still a priority for the government, and it's sort of, I don't know why it's always getting a lot more money, but it's usually, if you don't educate your people, there's nowhere you're going. So it's getting around 781 billion Kenyan shillings. But for governance and everything, it's 353 billion. That's what we have right there. But that again is because of the IBC. IBC gets around 27 billion Kenyan shillings because of election preparedness and stuff like those. So that falls under governance and the 2027 election. Now moving on, and again, that chunk of money right there is because we are leading into the election period. Now education gets the biggest chunk, 781 billion Kenyan shillings, up by 25 billion. Of course, that is a priority by the government, and year on year, it has always gotten a lot more than most. And I'll tell you who is the biggest loser. This is the biggest winner. I'll tell you who is the biggest loser, and is interesting. Is, of course, I'll preempt, is the energy sector, but moving forward is the energy sector, and is interesting, is tied to the National Infrastructure Fund. We can move to the next slide. On energy, who is the biggest loser again, as I've mentioned, energy gets 535 billion, which is down by nearly 70 billion Kenyan shillings. And this is because the government thinks, because of the National Infrastructure Fund and, that stance that this Kenya Kwanza government has put in terms of privatizing and getting money from, privatizing and getting the IPO from KPC, that type of fund is what will be funding stuff like getting the last mile, getting poles of electricity and stuff like those. So they will use that to get the money that is going to be a deficit here from the previous budget. And also remember, the corporations that work in the energy sector make a lot of money still. They are profitable, or they are good, like KenGen, Kentraco, and Kenya Power, so they can stand for themselves. That is one, and that's why this is down by 7.2 billion Kenyan shillings, the shift towards using the National Infrastructure Fund. The next slide, I think, that's on governance. The next slide on governance, of course, that is where it's still on election, but is up by 26 billion. And I think that 26 billion is exactly what the IBC gets, which is around 27 billion. So yeah, that's what goes to governance. But of course, it's a change from financial year 25, 26, 326 to right now 353 billion Kenyan shillings. That's a huge increase. considering we need fiscal discipline owing to the debt that we have. Now, this other one also is tied to the election, the next slide, which is on security, the national security. So on national security, remember we are heading to the election. Police are used properly by government to run the election, that is one. And two, the reasoning, now I'll give you the actual reasoning on this appropriation bill. They say the national security is up by 20 billion to modernize the security apparatus and also improve on the intelligence that we have. Modernize and improve intelligence because of the regional tensions in terms of wars that is going on and everything. We have to be prepared, but I can't help but notice that also it's an election period, and perhaps we use this national security more locally than against our, against the borders. But still, we need modernization and improve, and we need to also improve our intelligence. So for the national security, they have proposed 308 billion Kenyan shillings, 0.6 billion because that 0.6 is so big, and it's up by 20.7 billion. That's for national security, up 20.7 billion. So these are one of the biggest winners actually, apart from education, is security apparatus and everything. So health services, of course, the government has an agenda there. Leading to the election, they have the national health services to look at, universal health services, I beg your pardon. It's allocated 175.5 billion Kenyan shillings. This is, of course, important for both our health, improving the universal health coverage, and, of course, good for the campaign and on top of cars, speeches. And then next, I think this is automated. We'd want to, the primary health care also, SHIF is another on top of the car announcements. It goes up 10.6 billion. From 164.9 billion, it goes up to 175.5 billion. So that's just how the budget looks up to health. I'll continue on these slides. I have everything prepared for you, but the stance on this particular budget, Nduh and Aseto, and our distinguished guests, it looks like the government is observing fiscal discipline, at the same time looking like it's getting ready for the election and putting out a good number just so it doesn't trigger, tension among citizens. Nduh.
Of course, thanks for those numbers, Kelly Boss, and to be able to look into those a little bit more in depth, looking at where a lot of the chunk of this money is going, where it's been allocated. So, of course, we'll be coming back to look at some of those. But economist Odhiambo Ramogi is with us in the studio today. And a very good morning to you.
Good morning, Nduh.
It's budget day.
Indeed it is, and it's interesting to see you this side of the studio.
I know.
Where there's too much light. I'm used to the other side.
It's the magic of the broadcast.
Exactly.
Karibu either way. And even though we look at the numbers, we can still get your mind to go a little bit, where we ask you to interpret a proverb. Why not?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So today we're in Guinea, bauxite. Think aluminium or aluminum, depending on whether you're in the US or Britain. They're rich in oil, diamond, and gold. But let's go to the proverb. The river never drinks its own water. So the river never drinks its own water, and the tree never eats its own fruit. How would you interpret it?
I think in all the years I've been to the Situation Room, that's the best proverb I've heard ever. It means you're not the beneficiary of your life capacity or goodness, as it were. Your kindness will be felt by others. Your goodness will be felt by others. So that then you become a river from where the rest of humanity can enjoy a drink, and you become a tree from where the rest of us can see fruits and enjoy those fruits. I'm a biblical Christian, and we believe that Christian must have the fruit of the Holy Spirit. And you are not the beneficiary of that fruit, it's other people around you.
You know, as well, one would say, one person who benefited from that tree is Isaac Lim and the gravity.
You had to bring in gravity at some point.
At some point, looking at how things fall, for sure. You talk about beneficiaries, you talk about fruit being shared. You could liken that to the budget and how we're looking at it today. Kelly Boss has just given us those numbers. We're looking at who gets a lion's share.
Right.
And then maybe who doesn't get as much of a lion's share of the budget. Now, education is a big one. But then also this is happening at a time where education seems to be in a bit of a headwind with other things. Do we actually see that this 700 and so odd billion shillings that has been allocated to education actually is feeding the sector?
Well, I have a lot of comments about this budget, so I will try and control myself to minimize or say the one which is asked. The education sector rightfully should receive a lot of investment because it ensures that there is a continuation in our country. It ensures that we build capacity. It ensures that the young people today are able to participate in the labor market globally, competitively, today and tomorrow. And so the budgetary allocation, the high budgetary allocation is on point. Yes, it's in fact necessary. As regards our allocation in the education, the problem is no longer do we have sufficient budgetary allocation. The problem is the measurement, is where the money going really, having the desired results on one end. On the other, is the allocated money going where in fact it should go. If you look at the amount of money that we've given the Ruto administration for education since coming to power over the 3 years, it's now close to 2 trillion.
Yes.
And the question we always ask ourselves is there something to show for it that, yes, we've put in 2 trillion in this sector? Now, let me just break it down the way I would in my mind. Of the 700 billion, about 400 go into paying teachers, salaries of the primary school teachers and the secondary school teachers. Capitation comes to around 115 billion. This is 1,400 per primary school child, and 22,244 for every secondary school child.
On paper.
On paper.
On policy.
Policy, that is what they said they are going to use that money for last year when they asked Parliament for it. Now, there are about 10 million primary school children and about 4.7 million secondary school children. And so you add that up, you come to about 115 billion going into capitation. Then one wonders, why would the Ministry of Education communicate to head teachers, I think a few weeks back we saw it, that they are only going to give them 91 shillings for capitation for school equipment when you see that the budgetary allocation is actually sufficient. So then that is why I still retreat back to my initial point, which is the problem is no longer budgetary allocation. The problem is measurement. The problem is follow-up. The problem is the money allocated really going to the people it's meant for? And you come to see and investigate some of the reasons why the young people are up in arms in the secondary schools. Partly is because I saw a video of them complaining about the food they eat, complaining about the living standards, and etc. I mean, some of them don't even have basic needs like water. They have to go to the river a kilometer away to get water and then come back to land. And so For me, I think that's the major question as regards education. Of course, there is money going to the university students. Again, help is there, but there are many university students who are still at home waiting for their parents to sell land so that then they can attend, university education. Again, where is the money that is supposed to facilitate them to go to school?
Odhiambo, another area that has received a big boost would be healthcare and security, right? But let's focus on healthcare. And when we talk about healthcare, a healthy nation is a working nation, pretty much. Without a healthy nation, even the taxes that are being levied on individuals would not be able to, because we don't have the energy to do all that, because we are a sick nation. But then again, you look at the allocation that goes there and the problems that we have in the health sector. Do they match? Services that Wananchi get as well?
Let me first of all say that the allocation is in order. I saw Rigathi Gachagua's alternative budget proposing that we increase our budgetary allocation for health to 300 billion, up from what the Ruto administration has proposed, which is 175 billion. On paper, it sounds good, but then there's a technicality. Health is majorly a devolved function. So now what we remain with at the national level is the national referral hospitals, namely KNH, and I'm not sure, but I think Moi Teaching as well. Now, that puts us in a pickle. If you allocate 300 billion, are you going to tell the counties how to use this money, or are you going then to spend this money on behalf of the county government? There's a legal conundrum there that Rigathi's proposal created. That said, let's now look at what is proposed and whether, in fact, it is able to do what is expected. At the national level, we expect the national government to lead in policy. We expect the national government to lead in training. We expect the national government to lead in investment. We expect the national government to lead in pandemics. And so, as regards the scope of what the national government is supposed to provide in the health sector, I'd say that amount is sufficient. Okay. Perhaps even more than sufficient. But then again, the question that is begging is, are we doing some of the functions that county governments are supposed to do? And let me explain. The national government is now the one coordinating purchase, procurement of drugs and equipment. This is a bit problematic because the law anticipated that a county government in Kakamega or a county government in Garissa will be able to organize themselves and ensure that there are drugs for their people, ensure that there is equipment for their people. When the national government takes up this function, political considerations come into play. And we say that health is too important to be left to political considerations at the national level. And so when you now have to make political considerations, did the people of Garissa vote the government of the day or not? You are subjecting those, you are permitting those people, you know what, you can just die because you did not vote for us. And so for me, I think that is one of the problems. The other problem I foresee is there's a lot of mismanagement in the health sector, especially as regards SHA. SHA generates an additional 148 billion annually. Now, if you add that to the 175 billion, we have sufficient money to ensure that Kenyans are adequately taken care of as regards universal health coverage, because SHA is supposed to provide for service delivery. You hear me in the list I gave, there was no service delivery, as it were. But there's a lot of reports of mismanagement of SHA. There's a lot of reports of mismanagement of that money going into private accounts. in all honesty and with all humility, I think C.S. Duale has demonstrated to us that the national government can also be, can equally be incompetent in managing our health as well as the county government. And perhaps just to finalize on that, you know, in 2013, 2014, when the county governments first came into power, there was a debate. Why did we allow our health to be devolved to a smaller unit of government? But you look at it now, I think that debate is settled. Because whether it's national or county, it's more about the leadership than it is about the level of government.
But we equally can't talk about the allocations that have been given to health sector and not talk about the registration of individuals through SHA who as well contribute to that kitty. Because what you're seeing is what has been allocated, the exchequer will give their part. Right. But here we're talking about what then Kenyans are contributing to the same and how that then would contribute to funding healthcare. And as well, the millions of Kenyans who are registered and are not paying. So should these be conversations that we are having at this particular moment, especially when it comes to healthcare?
Yes, indeed. I had mentioned that SHA is generating around 148 billion. Now, if we streamlined that properly, because there are complaints that the system asks poor people to pay more than it does richer people with more sufficient income. So if we streamlined that, we expect that that system should be able to generate upwards of 200 billion. And that is additional money coming into play. The people who are not able to pay for SHA, surely it is a possibility that they have no income. And then we should find ways and means of cushioning them. Because you see, if an old man of 82 years old is dependent on the Kenyan government to give him 2,000 shillings every month for sustenance, how do you expect this old man then again to look for money to pay for SHA and you not covering him? I think one of the conversations that we need to have actively is the people who are registered, that they are over 80 and should be automatically entered into the SHA system so that then we cushion them in that fashion. But beyond that, it is an opportunity for Kenyans to contribute towards their health. It is a great opportunity for the Kenya government to collect additional money for service delivery. Yes. If well managed, I think it can get us where we need to go.
And yet, it seems that it's not well managed. If we're talking about the budget, then it's very clear that there are certain holes here and there. The conversation about whether things have functioned, whether we looked at education, whether we looked at health, which are critical services for which a budget is being created to see how you're going to fund them. And so the question marks then are already coming up. So then if we look at something like security, defense, whereby the very front lines and corridors of the nation ought to be protected, do we see that there is a lapse in its performance vis-a-vis the money that is being allocated in this budget?
A sitting president is on record saying that a third of our budget is goes into corruption. Yeah. And it's properly documented, it's properly budgeted for, it's budgeted corruption. And so what you're saying, essentially, is there a possibility that there is a lot of wastage in our budgetary or in our public financial management system? And this wastage then is affecting service delivery as is expected or as is budgeted for. And the answer is yes. We've seen this in education, we've seen this in health, and as you've rightly pointed out, we've also seen this in security. Security receives a lot of money, and every time you have an issue, you are asked, weka mafuta, weka pesa ya mafuta, so that now we can pursue your matter.
And that budget should cover for all of these things.
It should.
The mafuta included.
It definitely should.
Okay.
Ama nunulia askari credit.
Yes.
Sababu hii maneno inakaa, we need to make several phone calls. And so some of those things are not met, yet are budgeted for. And so I think the gap majorly is a governance issue. And so more conversation. You know, these reports that the controller of budget gives 3 months in how we've managed budget, 6 months in how we managed budget, 9 months in, and that should be a very, very important conversation moving forward, because then it tells us whether, in fact, the money that was allocated for a certain function, we have what we call a program-focused budget, whether the money that was allocated for a certain program, in fact, did what it was supposed to do. Because you find, yesterday I heard that State House spent about 4 billion, which is unplanned for, after planning for themselves 27 billion. The question is, where did this 4 billion come from? Which sector, which program, which service was affected by such a decision? And so, for me, I think the real issue, the real crust of it, our budgetary allocation as it is right now is legally sound, economically apt, and even scientifically in order. The bigger question is the follow-up of, was the money used properly on one end, and two, was the governance principles upheld?
Ramogi, you know, we find ourselves in a confusing situation. You know why? Because we look at allocations that have gone into infrastructure and development, which has dipped. Yet every other time whenever we borrow, the law says you borrow for development. That means infrastructure should have seen a huge allocation, because that would spur many other people to start businesses, and by virtue of doing that, then economy would get more through taxation. Right. So when we look at development, infrastructure pretty much getting lower allocation in this budget, but then again, even when you're going to borrow the 1-point-something trillion that should ordinarily go into development, what exactly are we saying? What exactly are we saying when even KRA says, the government says, we want to expand the tax bracket, but we are not giving allocations that would help you expand the tax bracket?
You've reminded me of a question your colleague asked, whether small businesses mean more taxes.
Yes.
But we'll come back to that. It's interesting that you framed your question as regards infrastructure and not development. And I'll tell you why. The way lawyers define development spending and the way economists define development spending, two different things. For us, salaries for a doctor that is stationed in Lodwar is development spending. Because what we are saying is that the community there now has health facilities closer to them, and it's not just a facility, it's a facility with a resource person, it's a facility with equipment. And so the lawyer would define the construction of the facility as development spending. The economist will describe that construction, the drugs, the equipment, and the salary for the doctor as development spending. Now, who writes the laws? It's the lawyer. So you find many times we are at loggerheads, because there are a lawyer would imagine that brick and mortar development is, in fact, development. An economist believes that development into expenditure, into seeds, into fertilizer, that ensures that there is food security is part and parcel of development spending. And so the legal threshold of development spending might need redefinition and might need description, so that then we come to a point where we agree, yes, when we spend more on agriculture, it's in fact development spending. But now to come back to your question, which is why infrastructure should be lower. The reason why infrastructure should be lower is because the law allows for borrowing against infrastructure. It does not allow for borrowing against salaries for doctors in Lodwar or in Garissa. So then, as the person now allocating resources, you say, let me allocate resources to this core function and then borrow for infrastructure because the law allows me to borrow for infrastructure. So it makes sense why they would do that just so that they meet the requirements of the law.
So to maybe try to avoid the impalatability of corruption as an overt practice in budget making, because a lot of what we say from across society is that budgeted corruption is one of the issues that we have. That's why we can't actually be sure that all 758 billion shillings goes towards education, for example.
Yeah.
So we choose to say that maybe there isn't an understanding of what ought to be done. That when you say 758 billion shillings ought to go towards education, that 758 billion shillings actually goes towards education. So maybe there's too much work. Maybe there are too many lines to cross. Maybe there are too many children.
Right.
Maybe there's too much too much of a need in terms of infrastructure. Are there any other reasons as to why 758 billion shillings in the year 2026-2027 would not go towards education?
Yes and no. Overarching, budgetary allocations are the aspirations of the government of the day as to where they want to put their priorities. And so you put your money where your eyes or where your mouth is, as it were. I'm not sure. Yeah. However, there are usually challenges. One is when you overshoot revenue. You expected that you will get a lot of revenue, say 2.5 or 3 trillion revenue. And then what you get is a lot lower. And so there is the budget that is read and is allocated, and then there is the reallocation that happens across the year as they say, what is most important, what is most, what is most urgent. And then that one gets funding and something else does not. Again, the other overarching reason why would be delay in donor funding. Sometimes you make budgetary allocations because a donor has told you, we will give you money. And then a president like Donald Trump comes to power and says, no, we will not give you money. And then now you have to readjust your budget to make room for such an eventuality.
Why would you budget on something that you do not have?
Yes. But that is what a budget is. It's futuristic. It's futuristic.
But if you make, I'm sorry, Ramogi,
yes.
If you budget with your salary, you know that your salary is 50 shillings. So you budget based on what you know you have coming in.
Right.
And perhaps where I'm going with this question is, should we not get to a time where you actually budget with what you know you have so that you don't run into the situations that you're speaking of?
That would happen if we have sufficient surplus for, say, 10 years, and then we save that surplus, and then now we start using that surplus to budget, as opposed to budgeting against revenue, against appropriations in aid, against donor funding. But as it is right now, we do budget with expected revenue in mind. Appropriations in aid, you go renewing your driving license. That is budgeted for. We do budgeting with in mind with donor funding. So a budget is futuristic in nature, and that is a reality. And donors' funds will always be put into play, because if then the money comes and there's no budgetary allocation for it, the Treasury has resources that it cannot spend. His hands are tied. He has money, but he does not have the legal vote to use that money. So it has to be in budget, so that now by the time it comes, he knows this money needs to go immediately. Now, so The second reason is the donor funding delaying and or not coming at all. Now, coming to the real issues, which is the education sector, we have in history, not too long ago, seen instances where an education officer registers a school in his county. And the school has a board, and the school has accounts, bank accounts, and the school has a motto, and school uniform, and even some pictures, fictitious pictures. But the school is non-existent. The school is nowhere to be found. And so there are instances where inspectors find this out, and of course that money is reallocated. But the major reason, and even that one, I know the way it sounds more like a governance issue. The major reason is corruption. Where now someone just redirects funds that are meant to help the public or in the service delivery to their own personal use.
Ramoke, you just mentioned something that I think I want to understand, maybe our listeners and viewers want to understand better, that we overshoot our revenue targets, you know. So here we are, we know exactly where we are, that we put a target of budget of 4 trillion, we know we are going to collect 2.8, you know. Why is that the case? You know, because many would say, if I know my revenue is 2.8, 2.9 trillion, can I work with that? Then with the deficit that is there that I know I will borrow and everything else, I can use that because the law allows me to do that. But are we intentionally overshooting so that we can budget corruption in there?
Interesting question towards the end. So first of all, I need to clarify between overshooting revenue and budgeting beyond revenue.
Yes.
Overshooting revenue is, you know that, for example, in 2025, you received revenue of 2.5 trillion. And now you overshoot and you say, I'm expecting revenue of, say, 3 trillion. But it's not clear where this revenue is coming from, or your forecasting is not properly scientific. And no forecasting is properly scientific, really. But then again, there are usually some economic shocks that come into play. Some revenue expected through exports do not materialize because maybe of some war or some eventuality. And so for this reason, then you receive less revenue than forecasted. So that's what we call overshooting revenue. But what you're really asking is us budgeting beyond our revenue, expected revenue, which is we are budgeting for 4.8, but our revenue is 2.8. Well, first of all, they are saying that the deficit is around the deficit around 5%, which is about 1.1 trillion. So it's still within healthy means. We expect it to come lower than 5%. But budget, lower. Yeah. Really, our expectation is that the deficit must come lower than 5%. Right now, it's around 5% plus change, but now we expect that it should come lower. The challenge we are having is they are making very large budgets. And so the deficit, which has traditionally been there, looks smaller, but because of the bigness of the budget, but the deficit is not reducing as it were. Now, governments generally must budget beyond revenue, partly because of appropriations in aid, partly because of donor funding, and partly because governments must borrow. I don't know how to put it. But governments must borrow. There are instances where central bank does not, like the national government does not need money, but central bank needs to borrow.
Why?
Why?
Monetary policy. It's called mopping. You just go into the market and you find that there's too much money in circulation. And so you go mopping it.
What would be the indicators of too much money in circulation?
Inflation.
Okay.
So that then when there is, after elections, ordinarily, because our politicians dish money during elections, around and after elections, there's usually too much money in circulation. Central bank, whether the national government wants money or not, central bank must come and mop that money through treasury bills or treasury bonds. So governments must borrow. I don't know how else to put it.
Well, even taking that into consideration, governments must borrow, but at the same time have fiscal responsibility when it comes to ensuring that the borrowing is pinned to a project that makes sense.
And that is why now the budget beyond their revenue, so that what they borrow, find somewhere to go. The Japanese used to even to pay you to give them money when there's deflation, pay you to borrow from them. But that is a different case altogether. And so because of that, then you'll find that budgets usually must be larger than the revenue anticipated.
You know, we're talking about the budget, the funding of the same, the winners, the losers, and what needs to be done. But let's touch base with the Nduh Kipkemboi, who is at the Treasury building. Good morning, Norm. How is the weather there? Is it cold today? Last year you complained about it being chilly, but what's the situation like? What's the mood outside Treasury?
Good morning, Aseto. It's relatively cold, you know, but nothing uncommon. Very cold Nairobi this beautiful morning. Quite interesting. Lots of activities right here at the National Treasury. Planning, you know, it is a national occasion, so red carpet has been laid at the entrance. It's a whole occasion, reading the budget for the financial year 2026-2027. But this place is quite historic when you talk about Treasury and what happens here. When you go back in time, actually it's quite interesting that this ministry was introduced in 1954, and this was under the constitution known as the Oliver Lytton Constitution. Just came in after the Mau Mau uprising, and they needed to calm things down. And one of the things that they did, Oliver Lytton, who was then the Secretary of State for the British colonies, decided that we need a constitution in Kenya. And that's how this ministry was established as the Ministry of Finance and Development. Today is known as Treasury and Economic Development. So things have shifted, and since then, post-colonial, we saw the first minister coming in, African minister, that is James Gishuru, served between 1963 to 1969, and right now we are on our 15th minister, CPA John Mbadi Ngongo, who is actually expected this afternoon to come down with the ceremonial briefcase to say that this is how we're planning ourselves for the upcoming financial year. So right here, things are quite calm, but we are expecting. Earlier on, we saw the actually the PS, that is Dr. Chris Kipto, just walking around, supervising the place, making sure that everything is going as it should in terms of preparation. But it's pretty chilled, just as the weather Aseto. So are things down here, even as we unpack the numbers touching our budget 2026-2027. Back to in studio.
Thank you very much, Nduh Kipkemboi. We continue to touch base with all our reporters out there, making sure that we bring you up to date with regard to the budget statement. Nduh.
Yeah, sure. So, of course, still continuing our conversation with Ramogi Odhiambo, economist, this morning, and just looking at what will be the It seems that we seem to think that something different may happen when the budget statement is read at about 2:30, 3 o'clock this afternoon. But the folks who've been putting this together for the last 9 months seem to be very clear about what they've said. This is how much you have. This is what you need to do. Right. This is where you're going to get it from. This is how you're going to spend it. It doesn't look anything different from what happened last year, 2025 going into 2026. But if you want to have a progressive economy, it seems to me that these actions that we're looking at today, what has been happening for the last 9 months, then need to change.
Yeah, I think we have adopted the incremental budget approach where you just adjust upwards a little bit. This year we've adjusted it by around 2.7, I heard you say, just 2.7%. So, and that's why I was saying that our budget making process is legally sound and largely scientific. You just get what you already have and you see how can you expand it and you move forward. And then treasury departments, just like central banks, are generally usually very conservative. You make noise, but what they have put their mind in terms of this is what we want to do is good. So just pray that whoever is there really is visionary and aligns their operations with the national vision, or the Vision 2030 in our case, or whatever vision will be there beyond 2030. So that would not necessarily change. If you want significant change, I think the person that I saw was non-conservative and very rugged in his change approach was Kamau Thuge when he came to central bank. Because beyond that, before that...
let us listen to what FCPA John Barry is saying.
Public participation and public knowledge. Today is not maybe in the 90s or early 2000 up to 2010. The budget estimates, the revenue raising measures are with the public from 30th of April to date. What maybe Kenyans will be listening to is the details of these revenue raising measures and budget highlights. So there is really no surprises, just giving more details on what it is that is in the budget estimates and the finance.
This is your second budget as the Cabinet Secretary for the National Treasury. When you look at your first budget and this second budget, how difficult or how easy has this one been?
Well, there is no easy budget. In fact, this year's budget is even informed by a number of challenges, one of which is the external shock that we are facing. You know, now we have a war in the Middle East, and that war is completely disrupting the world economy. And so we are preparing this budget in the backdrop of a major external shock, what is close to be called world war. And so there are a lot of uncertainties, and again, underperformance in revenue collection, the rising inflation. That's a major thing because we are preparing a budget at a time when the inflation is rising. Last year it was different. Inflation was contained. Today it is rising. So this budget is more challenging.
All right, for a lot of Kenyans, they'll be looking at some of the food commodity prices that will be brought down. But the question that I want you to know, in terms of the sectors that could generate a lot of economic activity, a lot of jobs, are you doing something around that?
Yeah, of course, we are investing quite significantly in agriculture as the backbone of our economy. Remember, agriculture is also largely devolved. And I think that is also something that we are missing in our discussions when we talk about underfunding agriculture. Agriculture is heavily devolved, but the government is coming up with interventions to support a number of crops, both for food consumption and exports. Like tea, you can see in the past 2-3 years, government has invested a lot in the tea sector. We have also invested a lot in the revival of the coffee sector. We have invested a lot in edible oil, and I will speak to that in Parliament. We have also invested a lot now in sugar reforms and many other crops. But again, in food production, you can see the efforts that the government has put in terms of subsidy, fertilizer subsidy, provision of seeds has helped us in increasing the quantity or the amount of food or maize, which is our staple food. The production of maize has gone up. Well, we have also been lucky that the weather has been favorable, but the government's intervention is clearly visible and evident.
All right,
Waziri.
Okay. When you look at just looking at the funding of this budget, revenue underperformance is still a major headache. What is your plan around that?
Revenue performance is still a big challenge, and it is informed by a number of factors. One of them is the inefficiency at the KRA that cannot be wished away, but there have also been some challenges in terms of tax administration. I will point out that our tax administration has challenges because the business has moved from the normal traditional way to more into again informal sector, and besides that there has also been the movement towards the digital economy, and so we are doing a lot of reforms. In the supplementary budget that we prepared, we had allocation for KRA to do reforms, to carry out reforms, about 17 billion. And a lot of reforms are happening at the KRA. And I'm sure then in the next or the coming financial year, KRA will be able to collect more without raising tax rates. And if you look at my finance bill that I presented to Parliament, it's heavy on reforms and tax administration as opposed to raising tax rates, contrary to what others have been saying. Yes.
Waziri, thank you very much. I know you touched a bit on agriculture. There are quite a number of votes that have been seen to reduce allocation when we look at supplementary one and this particular budget. Agriculture is one of them. You're cutting almost 10 billion shillings from there. Energy is one of the major cuts also that you've seen, almost 72 billion. Can you talk to us about this? But education, actually one of the biggest bumps also on the other side, are getting a huge, allocation. Talk to me about this balancing act that you have to consider when you're making this particular budget.
We have tried to maintain most of the provisions under the agriculture sector, no major cuts. I will tell you, in the fertilizer subsidy, we have maintained almost the same amount of 18 billion. We have also maintained almost similar amount in sugar reforms at 2.5. Yes, we have reduced a bit. Parliament actually cut the coffee cherry, but I think we need to put a little more on the coffee debt, because that is where money is needed. We had provided for 1 billion was cut from the coffee cherry, and I thought it would be put under the debt, but Parliament in its own wisdom decided to reallocate the fund elsewhere. We are also putting more resources in providing coffee seeds, and so we have not really underfunded the agriculture budget. But energy, you are right. Energy, we did an assessment, and we came to a conclusion that a number of projects and programs, this is a zero-based budget. We have started implementing zero-based budget where you justify every shilling that you are asking from the national coffers. So when we looked at the energy sector, we realized a number of projects are actually commercially viable, and that is why we started the National Infrastructure Fund. So we have taken them out of the budget, not that they are not going to be funded, but they are going to be funded differently by applying the National Infrastructure Fund and PPP program. So definitely, and energy sector will still be funded heavily, but away out of our budget.
And lastly, from me, Waziri, we talk about the issue of Tax Procedures Act. Lots of changes right there, especially this movement from zero-rated to tax-exempt. And one of the areas that we've seen with the current government is the issue of affordable housing. There's been proposition now, we are moving them from exempt to, rather from zero-rated to exempt. And some people are saying, is this counter administration, which is actually very forward with issues to do with affordable housing?
No, far from it. My finance bill is working more towards simplifying tax collection and making it efficient. Let me put it this way. Yes, that provision was put there to attract more investment into affordable housing sector. But you also have to review. When you have a tax expenditure like that, you continuously review its performance. If it is not adding much value to the economy, then it has no business being left, because it's an expenditure. When you have Kenyans claiming for taxes, it is us who pay for it. Those of us who probably are not even involved in that business. So we have looked at the value being added, and there is no much value. But two, there is a problem. There is a problem in the sense that administering that provision or that tax expenditure is very difficult, and it is causing a lot of leakages. Now, if you say that cement, for example, for affordable housing, you will not tax, steel, etc. How do you determine? How do you separate? How do you ensure that the cement that has been bought is actually going to affordable housing and is not going to current to put up my house. So those challenges we are trying to eliminate by removing zero rating and taking them to exempt. We are not going to tax them, but we put exempt so that there are no claims, because there have been unnecessary claims that don't make sense at all.
And how about EVs? Because we've also seen a lot of focus on EVs.
We are saying we should move as many items as possible to exempt and not zero rating. The exempt are also, they are not paying tax. The only thing is that they are not going to claim input tax. And this allowing of input tax claims is creating a lot of problems, because then you allow all kinds of unscrupulous people to come forward. And by the way, if you look at our medium-term revenue strategy and the tax policy, national tax policy, it is clear on what we need to do. And it is clear on the fact that we should remove most items from zero-rated to exports. We should only allow export commodities to be zero-rated. We have left some under zero rating still, because they are very essential and very sensitive, like bread, like milk and the rest. But ordinarily, almost all items need to go to either exempt or vatable at the standard rate. Zero rating is not the right thing to do. It creates tax expenditure, it creates tax leakages and tax planning, which is not very good.
Thank you very much, Azil. Okay. All right.
All right, of course, that is the CS Treasury, John Badi, as he was getting into Treasury building this morning in preparation for the budget reading that will take place later on. And here in studio, just getting into our final comments with economist Ramogi Odhiambo as we look into this afternoon. He's mentioned that there's not necessarily a defunding of agriculture, for example, as an important sector, but just ensuring that the needed resources go towards sector growing indicators. How do you see that playing out?
Well, I am glad that he acknowledged that agriculture is a big employer, has great capacity to create employment and to create a multiplier effect across the country everywhere. Kenya is a signatory to the Malabo Declaration that requires that agriculture take at least 10% of our budget. Our budget is 4.8 trillion, so that means at least 480 billion should go into agriculture. Their budgeted allocation to agriculture is around 170. And his claim is that agriculture is highly devolved. Now, the challenge is even the whole amount going to the devolved functions is less than the 480, is around the 480. So are you anticipating that the county governments will put 100% of all their money in agriculture? Absolutely not. And so then if they are keen on empowering agriculture, then let them increase the devolved function, the money going to the devolved units, so that there is clarity that of the amount coming to the devolved functions, this is specifically for agriculture to enable us to, align with the Malabo Declaration. So that is not clear from his explanations.
All right, Ramogi Odhiambo, thank you very much for
thank you
analysis
for having
of this.
Me in the Situation Room.
Of course, into the Situation Room and looking to what that will look like this afternoon. And I know that all ears are peeled, eyes are peeled there as well. Our coverage in depth of the budget 2026-2027 continues. It's Nduh in the Situation Room and on KTN this morning. We'll continue after this. Stay with us.
.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Mom, who's this letter from? Your father wrote it before he was gone. He said he'd always find a way to take care of us. And did he? Yours, your brother's school fees, every hospital bill, our rent, every month without fail. So that's how you manage everything? Yes. He took an insurance cover from Britam, which still takes care of our expenses even after his passing. He always thought about us. He may be gone, but his love never stopped.
Britam Whole Life Plan gives you lifetime cover and a guaranteed cash payout to your family when you pass away, so they are financially taken care of. Britam Whole Life Plan. Not if, when. Britam, with you every step of the way. Regulated by the Insurance Regulatory Authority. SMS Life. Name of your town to 21778 or visit ke.britam.com.
Most people don't know that there's a best battery for your car. And when you don't have exactly the right battery, not all batteries are the same. Make sure you get exactly the right battery for your car with Chloride Exide's super powerful Exide batteries with advanced technology designed for start-stop vehicles. Choose the best for your car. Choose Chloride Exide.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
I am also a publicly elected official. Okay. My salary is paid by your taxes.
Yes.
So if you need me to answer questions, we will not run away from you.
Asante
We will always be here.
The government itself is engaging in corrupt practices. That the government itself deliberately schemes to influence through bribery members of parliament.
You pay for a passport online. Alafu you're told there are no booklets.
I rebuke matters corruption because corruption has brought this country to its knees.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
Members of parliament, they go to settle, they just promised they get given tea, mandazi, and 100,000. That's not development.
External borrowing, 589 billion. Are we on the same page? What did parliament pass?
If anything happened to our president today, God forbid, that man would become president. Na ndio alilenga hizo stories za Shakahola.
The real thing is our constitution has only one person who is accountable to us.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
The following takes place from 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. every weekday on SpiceFM.
Parliament has got powers. Let me break it down. The National Assembly can initiate an impeachment of the president.
This same National Assembly.
Yes. That's our constitution.
This is just a continuation of the previous administration.
Mature, intelligent talk every morning. Spice up yourself. Mornings done right. 94.4 Spice FM, Nairobi.
Thank you for staying with us in the special coverage of Budget 2026-2027. This is the Situation Room in our live simulcast with KTN this morning and Spice FM. And we continue our coverage of that while we have in-depth discussions as to what's going to take place later on in the afternoon when the CS Treasury John Mbadi reads the budget before Parliament. We'll continue with our discussions here in studio. But for now, we're going to join our reporter who is in the CBD. Ian Ketani is live this morning, and we're going to cross over and listen to what folks are saying about what the budget has in store. Ian, good morning.
Well, a very good morning to you, Nduh, Okoh. I do believe you are doing great right there, of course, alongside Dennis Aseto. I am at Kencom right here at the heart of the Central Business District of Kenya's capital, Nairobi. And like you rightly put it, today is a very big day for the country, despite the fact that, of course, a few Kenyans that I've spoken to are not even sure of whatever is happening today. Many of them are unaware that today the budget highlights will be presented before the National Assembly by the CS for Treasury, that is John Mbadi. But before I, give you an overview of what is happening here, allow me to just engage a few Kenyans who are here to let us know what they make of the budget, whether they do know that the budget is being presented today before the National Assembly. Number two, you start with your name, and do you know that today is the budget day in the country?
To start with, my name is Broderick Okoh. I come from Homa Bay County, where Mbadi comes from.
And yes, I'm aware that the finance bill is being announced today.
The budget, that is?
Yes, the budget, yes. And some of the things that I've read about it is that it's quite a good thing progressively. But maybe the hinge in them is that they do not prospect about they don't prospect in entailing the principle of intergenerational principle that maybe makes us to entail a budget that goes over a long duration of time, let's say over 100 years, because we are in this Kenya for a long time, and it's good to protect life and income and everything, all the resources that we can have, and we can grow them in a long duration of time, not just thinking about the next year.
Okay.
Yeah.
Pretty much. Just let me stop you there. We have a budget that will be presented today worth around 4.8 trillion Kenya shillings, of course, up from 4.3 trillion in the 2025-2026. Today's is 2026-2027. As a young Kenyan out there, do you feel, we are being overambitious in terms of that particular budget plan or spending plan that we're setting of 4.8 trillion?
No, I don't think it's overambitious, because I've done a few projects that show that this country might be here for such a long time, and only thinking about this year won't be enough. This rationale comes from, because I'm a party leader for the Kenya Republican Party, we are in the process of making all these things. So we have highlighted projects, because, from history we can even see that let's say, for example, the United States of America is going to have its 250th anniversary. So if you scope that into what the Minister for Treasury is going to do today, if he does something for 100 years to come, or entailing that kind of period, it will be such a good thing. It will be such a good thing.
Okay, pretty much. Let me just engage this gentleman here. Maybe you tell us your name and what are your expectations in regards to today's budget, which is will be presented to the National Assembly by the CS for Treasury, John Badi.
Okay, my name is Peter Mungai Washira. My expectation on this budget of today, I'm expecting that the CS will caution petroleum products. Likewise, we can see we have a budget of 4.8 trillion. This is a growing economy, but however, wananchi feel the effect of that growing economy. I am also expecting that things to do with things like housing levy. Currently, the housing levy has no date of. It's like I'm hearing that it will become a security for loans, and I think we should caution that and maybe have a date of when that housing levy will come to an end. Because if we take that housing levy for perpetuity, bila kujua hii housing levy itawahi kuisha lini na itatumika mpaka lini, I think we should have a policy where it will state clearly that we are going to have this housing levy up to this year, and from there maybe it can be converted to something else.
Ukiangalia hiyo budget, kuna vitu kama education wamekuwa allocated 781 billion. Ukiangalia health, kuna 175 billion. If you look at agriculture, there's been a negative deviation from the previous budget. We had around 117 billion imewekwa kwa agriculture, but this time around imepunguzwa by almost 9 to 10 billion to 107 billion. From where you stand, from where you sit rather, do you feel your reduction allocation to the agricultural sector itakuwa na negative impact in regards to, because we are a country that depends on agriculture. We have parts of the country that are heavily dependent on agriculture. The Rift Valley region, we have farmers in central Kenya who do potatoes. We have maize farmers in Trans Nzoia. So I don't know what you have to say in regards to that particular reduction in the allocation to the agricultural sector.
I would say that this time round, it's like the government is missing the point on that, because Kenya, we depend on agriculture. Agriculture is our backbone, and if we don't support sustainability of food in this country, then it becomes a crisis, because the population is growing, and to feed this population, you need agriculture to be highly supported. Tukiangalia budget ya kupunguza budget ya agriculture, that is to say subsistence in farm products itakuwa ngumu. hata kama president ana advocate for subsistence of fertilizer, then in the other hand budget ya agriculture inakuwa subsidized, inakuwa inapunguzwa. That is to say bado agriculture sector ndio backbone ya Kenya na tunafaa kuisupport effectively, na hapo naona kuna shida kidogo kwa kupunguza budget ya agriculture. At least wangepunguza maybe budget nyingine, tuseme kama development, nimeona wameweka 850 billion, something like that. Na hizi development zinafaa kuwa zimewekwa kwa every year we have a development yenye inakuwa sustainable, inaweza kufikika. Na agriculture pia ina support sana development, kwa sababu mwananchi akiwa ana uwezo wa kujitegemea chakula yake, anaweza kufanya maendeleo yake binafsi bila kutegemea serikali.
Labda tu la mwisho, wewe kama Mkenya hivi sasa, hali ya uchumi ikoje kwako? Do you feel pressed by the current economic situation, because the government inasema economy iko sawa, economy ina grow, and but the situation appears to be different to some Kenyans. I don't know kama kwako hali ni tofauti ama una feel things are a bit better.
Basically for me, I would say that na sio mimi binafsi, Kenyan population, wananchi wa Kenya wanaumia kulingana na budget. Leo hii ukiingia na 1000 kwa bank, that 1,000 you will buy only 2 or 1 item, and your 1,000 will be gone. So the effect of the economy kwa mwananchi, we are really feeling the weight, and I think we should get something to subsidize hizo effect ya mwananchi budget.
Sawa, shukran sana. Allow me to engage just one more person here. Labda utuambie jina lako, kazi ambayo unafanya, na maoni yako ni gani kuhusu hali ya uchumi sasa hivi?
Hello, mimi naitwa Morris Njoroge. Azin kwa YouTube wanajua kama JJ the Toy Maker. Mufanya art and creativity na kuchora na graffiti vile President Ruto alituambia. But sai kindly vile mimi naweza sema, okay, hii economy iko high. Me sai I have 3 kids. Pampers inanidai, shule inanidai. Sai wale watu wanapanda gari hapo akienda Kenyatta wana complain, SHA is not working. Acha kutudanganya. Speak the truth. Haezi nunua kila mtu na kila kitu. Tuongee tu kweli ile iko for real. Haezi nunua kila mtu na kila kitu. Lakini Mungu atatutetea. Hiyo kililio ya Kenya kila mtu analia, sikudanganyi, atalipa. Hiyo damu yake Mungu yuko juu atalipa. Kwa sababu sisi tunaumia. For example, tourism ilianguka. Haya, education ndio hiyo. Tunaambiwa ati anasimama kwa jukwaa anasema ati mimi nimetengeneza shule ya kwenda huku, nimetengeneza SHA gani? Hakuna SHA na hakuna education inaendelea. Ruto, wacha kudanganya watu. Hauwezi nunua kila mtu na kila kitu. In Jesus name, Mungu akutoe hapo. Na si kwa ubaya, na sijakutukana ama kuongea vibaya, but reality ni ile kitu iko. Economy sasa hivi leo umetuwekea, population inaenda ikigrow. Sasa hii hapa fellow touts. Hapo unajua ni watu wangapi wanalea? Many Kenyans, but congratulations to kwa KTN kwa kuja kutuhoji. In Jesus name.
Shukran. Of course, those are the views of Kenyans out here who are lamenting about the economic situation. You've heard him rightly, put it in terms of whether SHA is working or not. He's lamenting about that. He's lamenting about the cost of living, which he says is skyrocketing. So that is just what is happening here and what Kenyans have to say. We'll of course come back to you later on in regards to engaging more Kenyans and getting to understand what they have to say in regards to this budget and even the expectations as the country prepares for the next general election. Back to you, Nduh.
Thanks very much, Ian. Ian in the CBD this morning, of course, covering what Mwananchi have to say about the expected budget. And here in the studio, we're continuing with our analysis of that in-depth coverage of Budget 2026-2027. We're going to get into that conversation. 2 ladies join us this morning. Valentine Mweni is a policy research and budgeting at Haki Jamii. A very good morning to you.
Good morning.
Karibu Sana. Nelly Chepkemoi is a policy and advocacy manager with We Care. We're going to be tracking the money and actually asking ourselves questions that can we see where this budgeting money goes to. But really quickly, Dennis would like to share today's proverb with you. We'd love to get your interpretation.
I think before all else, we just need to say amen. Let's say amen in unison. Amen. We've just been blessed by the gentleman. How do you know that? Yeah, but today we are in Guinea, and the proverb that we get from Guinea says, the river never drinks its own water, and the trees never eat their own fruits. How would you interpret it, Nelly?
Good proverb, and I think I would interpret it bringing it back home. We are
making a budget, yeah, but we want to extract more because we are saying we want to plan for the Kenyans, but we are also taking more from them. So I think for me that is my interpretation, and for that speaks to really, and you know, when you start to look at it perspectively in relation to how people are struggling to survive, to even make ends meet, then you see the unfairness and the inequality that is coming out of how much is being extracted from the people we intend to plan for their lives to move forward.
Yeah. Mweni, how would you interpret it?
The river never drinks from its own, and the tree never eats from its fruit. I'd look at it outwardly, and Nelly has looked at it inwardly. Maybe now looking at it like the tree is supposed to sustain the rest of the environment. Its good is the rest will benefit from its benefits, same as the river. It will not benefit from its own existence, but others will benefit from its existence. So it could be a good thing if we look at it like the river exists to serve others, same as the tree exists to serve others. Do I need to bring it to the governance?
This is where we say inward, outward interpretation check.
Definitely. You know, and if we look at if government is there to serve the people, and the things that you put in place are supposed to actually make that work, let's then look at the budget and ask ourselves the questions. The big numbers that we are seeing: 758 billion education. We're looking at hundreds of billions into certain into the health sector. We're looking at security and defense, agriculture, according to the CS as early as this morning, talking about the fact that agriculture is where they're actually putting a lot of the attention. So now, when we hear the words, can we see, start with you, Mweni, can we actually see the physical manifestation, tangibility of these numbers?
I think I'd begin by saying that government services are just as good as how the public experiences them. So regardless of how much we actually invest in them, and coincidentally, these top 5 sectors haven't changed per se. Education is still the one getting top priority. Roads, the sequence is still the same in terms of top 5 sectors. But again, coincidentally, the same top 5 sectors are still the ones Kenyans are complaining the most about. I think we've really had there are no schools, there are no education. I think it's not translating per se. And then since we're already currently in the 4th quarter of the 2025-2026 budget, if we look at the control of budget and the indications from there, we have the 9-month implementation report that could also guide us to see when we started the year, what we allocated, is it really translating to what the Kenyans feel? I would say not really per se. The allocations are good on paper, but when it comes to translating and Kenyans actually feeling it in the ground, it is not really translating. There are still persistent gaps when it comes to the actual service provision and service delivery. Say per se, let us look at education. We can confidently say, and the government likes to use, it's getting the priority and the biggest proportion. But again, when it go to our schools, during the budget process, I engaged a number of communities just to hear their perspectives so that we could submit a memorandum that had their input. And most of their questions were like, why do we still have to pay money directly to schools? When we go to school, you're being told, as a parent, you have to add more money since the capitation isn't enough. Yet the government will tell us education had the highest. So as a percentage share of the total budget, it would look nice. But as a percentage share of the needs in the sector, we are still having very big deficits in these specific sectors, especially the ones that are relating to social services.
And Nelly, I want us to look at the budget as it were. So we look at education. We know the problems that do exist in education, yet it has the biggest vote in allocation as we speak today. So you talk about ghost schools, ghost students, inadequate infrastructure as well for schools. You go to healthcare, same story. You go to security, many would say, okay, they get more budget so that they shoot us whenever we go to the street. So in terms of value for money, are Kenyans relating big budgets with proper services, or does it remain at the budget policy statement?
Thank you. And I think that is where we should actually, as Kenyans, start from. And I want to agree with Valentine here, when we say, for example, education is taking the hugest, I think 27% of the whole budget, that is the 781 billion. We must start interrogating then as citizens whether that relates to the actual needs that education sector is there to serve. So if you interrogate further, let's just go to the numbers, like Nduh insists. With this 781, I think the huge budget goes specifically to teachers. If you look at their allocation, it is over 400 billion, I think, going to TSC specifically. So when you start now dividing that, you've already reduced almost half of that allocation to teachers. And we all know that teachers, or rather that budget is meant to pay salaries for the teachers. But then when you go back to the books, the budget books, for example, if you look at that draft estimate budget from this, and going further, that allocation, you see 54.6 billion goes to free secondary. But then look at what has been allocated for pre-primary. I mean, for free primary education, it is 7 billion. While we are still saying that, yes, education is taking the hugest chunk of the budget, but what is being allocated to the young learners in Kenya is only 7 billion shillings. And then moving further, I know we have done this work together with Valentine as an advocacy group out here. And we have analyzed the budget where you find we have also the existence of a national education sector strategic plan, the NESP, for example, if I shorten it. And if you look at now the public finance law that regulates us, Section 38 of the Public Finance Act demands that all program-based budgets should actually address or rather have outcome indicators. But when we look at this budget for education, for example, you're getting their indicators are not speaking to what is in their strategic plan. So we are already missing out the intended purpose for that money when we don't consider some of what the strategic plan tells us we should do. And then when it now comes to budgeting, we are looking at underfunding. Let me take another angle. If we look at the economic survey that was recently released, you look at what government is planning in the budget, still in the education sector, we are planning for close to 6.5 million learners in the primary, or rather in the basic education that covers from primary up to secondary level. We are planning, or rather budgeting, for 6.5 million. The economic survey says we have, if you look at that demographic of the basic education sector, it says we should be planning for 8 point. So in essence, we are even under planning and under budgeting, because then that shows the inequality where we are leaving out close to 1.9 children out of the learning, planning and budgeting.
So for purposes of clarity, who conducts the economic survey year on year?
It is government.
Government?
Yes.
Primarily from the Treasury?
Yes.
Okay? Yeah. So the folks who work in the back end are the ones who develop the economic survey.
Literally, yes.
So in terms of planning, they know this is where we should be going.
Yeah.
So why, I guess for both of you, wouldn't the budget, which is your tool for how to spend money, would not mirror the economic survey that you yourself developed? Why wouldn't that happen?
I'd look at it as it is a lack of goodwill from the government. We already know. And I think the easiest thing for us as Kenya, we always have long-term plans. We have Vision 2030, we have broken it into medium terms. Each sector has a specific plan for 5 years. So already from the onset, and there are projections in terms of growth, even if it's growth of learners, the projection is there for 5 years on. So it's not something we come and start guessing when the year is there. So either, and then we're also having a lot of allocation that are going to coordination of government services, but we are seeing different state departments not speaking on each other. It's one function that is being done by two. You see child protection services, some of their functions intersect with the education, but we're still seeing their plans not aligning. So the budget may be informed by one of the reports that was submitted by one of the state departments, not the other. So we have weak links in the coordination of the government itself. We are producing a report by one entity within the government, yet the ones budgeting are using a different report. So it's mostly lack of coordination, really.
Could be deliberate as well, because if you know that this is the numbers that we need, and you cannot go ahead and plan with those numbers, then it shows a deliberate plan by the government officials to even underfund. And for me, that speaks to the inequality bit of it. And then there comes in the aspect of pending, or rather the recurrent expenditures. While we are planning for what is to happen ahead, we still have all these things that we are supposed to pay. And even if you look at the allocations and distributions for every other sector, a huge chunk goes to the recurrent expenditure. While what is meant for development is really either not allocated or is being reduced. And that speaks then to the question that Nduh asked.
And I think when you look at the economic survey, that is an important document then that budget planners rely on to give credence on what kind of budget it is they're looking at. But already we've established that that document that is prepared by government does not feature or features little in the preparation of that budget, right? So one then asks the question, if we are not taking the economic survey report to prepare the budget, then what guarantees do we have that even the budget as presented will be implemented to its fullness?
Maybe I can begin.
Yes.
And it's not just the economic survey. You see, every sector has a sector report, which they also submit to the Treasury. So right now we're in 26-27. They have submitted a sector report that has the projections of the needs they'll have, financial needs, and both financial, based on their financial projections, 3 years on. So the economic survey is there. That's one very credible report you can rely on. Each sector has also submitted their needs way in advance. And then now, do we have any guarantees? I don't believe so, because this is where now the Control of Budget and Auditor General come in. I was really looking at the report by the Control of Budget, and I'd really surprise you by saying there are some very small state departments that are already overspending by more than 1,000%.
By small, you mean?
I'd say not. You see how we've already established the top 5 in terms of allocations? Some which had close to 0 point something allocation when we were making the budget, and even when it came to the supplementary, they didn't have increased allocation. But when we look at what has already been expended by these state departments, let me just give actual examples. Say, for example, State House, the exchequer releases is at 31st March was 161%, right? When we looked at the budget, it wasn't top 5. Office of the Deputy President, 129%, is at 31st March. Internal Security and National Administration as well is 105%. And then this one really caught my eye, the State Department for Special Programs, 1,419%. 1,000. It even sounds ridiculous.
I think you're going to need to say that again.
Say that again,
1,419%. They have over-absorbed their budget by that. That means now there are loopholes within the public finance that are being misused deliberately. Most of these allocations are now coming under the Article 223 of the Constitution, which allows for some appropriations that were not in the Appropriation Act. So the government is really playing us deliberately, because then if we compare the same to education, basic education for the same period, it was 49%. When we are making the budget, we said they had the largest chunk, but now looking at how much money has been released to them, it's now coming to only 49% of this 30% that we celebrated when we were starting. So there are really no safeguards. And then as a country, I don't think we take seriously the violations of PFM Act. You see how we treat other violations of other acts, very serious crimes. We are really contravening the PFM Act, but we are not seeing the same effort when it comes to now people actually facing consequences for the same, such as these ones.
What effects does that have to the overall performance of economy or the betterment of the lives of Kenyans? Because at the end of the day, this budget is supposed to serve Mwananchi. But if we are seeing we have departments that are overspending. There is no accountability on the same. While we look at other critical services, healthcare, education, we're talking about 49%, not even half of that has been expended to this. What does that mean to the overall performance of Mwananchi's life and quality of it?
And I'm going to actually pick from the guarantee you were asking. Already from what she's saying, and I'll pick from her mind, we have sector reports that ideally tell you even what is supposed to be allocated to a sector, for example. And let's just pick the education bit, for example. Even with that 780 billion, we are still 42% short of what is required. Yes. So by the fact that we are even budgeting and planning, we are already starting from a budget shortfall, because we already have a shortfall where the sector report says you require this, but what is allocated falls short of what is required. So before we even start, we are already operating from a budget shortfall. And then to make it worse, we have the debt issue. For me, that is a very problematic issue, because then that, if you look at what we want to pay in debt, is already double or 3 times what should have gone to the education. So already we have the budget shortfall already. We have some data gaps, like I've already told you what is in the economic survey and what is being planned for. So all those are not guaranteed safeguards for young people, I mean for Kenyans and even young people at large. And now looking at the economic outlook of it, is that there's also, I know we are talking of the budget and the expenditure side, but we also have to look at how are we raising this money to cater for the expenditure. And that brings me to your question as to how the outlook of the economy is to the citizens of Kenya. The inflation is also going high. And I know we are talking of the budget of being 4.8, but I want to bring a very controversial statement that perhaps maybe we might be operating with a 2 point something. Because in that 4.8 trillion budget, there's half of it untouched that is supposed to go to debt servicing. So when you start with that, it's already disappropriating, I mean, it is disadvantaging Kenyans, because then what is left to the education? What is left to the healthcare? What is left to manufacturing and production? We are a country that is economically moving through services. So picking up from how that looks, right now as a person, now the public debt issue, we are crowding out private sector, we are crowding out small enterprises, businesses, people who should be moving the economy. But then now when we have a situation where now we are competing as citizens with the government to be able to access credit to fund our lives, to fund our businesses, then you already have an outlook of how that looks. People will not be able to afford credit for their businesses, hence loss of business opportunities. There's not going to be a fair business environment. When you speak to the issue of employment, every year we keep giving out students from graduation. And I'm bringing still the aspect of budgeting, for example, with the higher education and the TVET aspect. Last year, for example, we had 993,000 learners coming from the KCSE examination period. But what are we planning? We are planning for 600 and something thousand. So already government is telling us that by design, we don't want to care about this number of people coming out from school. So where does that lead them to? These are people who are supposed to probably be looking for employment. So therein lies the crisis of unemployment. And then when you look at the taxation bit, we want to even infiltrate the little gig economy side that these people who may not be able to cover the formal employment can be able to access, but we are following that part where they are getting money. So it's really a crisis. We're in a fiscal crisis in the country.
So it sounds to me, when even as we wind this down, that going deeper into a crisis, even with a new budget reading, and it's not really solving anything. That's what it sounds like as we get into it.
That is actually what it is per se. Every year on, it's incremental allocations, but they don't really translate to any increase in the value and the quality. If we invest in it, it's not improving efficiency in education, efficiency in healthcare, how fast you access the services. You know, when you go to the local dispensary, the local hospitals, People are being sent to buy medicines from different places. Yet we are saying health was among the top 5 huge sectors. So already, by committing to whatever amount we are committing, it doesn't necessarily translate to any improvement in the lives of Kenyans, in the improvement in the service delivery, which is also a bad approach to it because we are still normalizing it. We are sitting comfortable in the situation saying this is what we always do. We will wait again next year. We have the same conversations. We lobby for incremental allocations towards education, towards health. So it's about time we now shift our focus more on actually translating the allocations into actual service delivery. The accountability bit, we can't really sit down and just say it was enough to allocate. The accountability matters more at this point, since the allocations, we believe, already Nelly has talked about the deficits and the domestic debt. We don't want to push the government into increasing the debt. Can we now just say with whatever allocations we have, how can they actually translate to improved services? So we need to shift our focus from the allocations to the accountability. And it's interesting because the Auditor General Office is one of the underfunded offices. And they were saying now it's limiting their, their independence and how they can really audit these offices. So if we want to look at the full circle of how money translates from the statement to the service delivery, we also need to enhance the accountability bits.
Maybe just to add a bit.
In addition to that, what would be quick wins, things that you could actually do to fix the bugs?
Okay. I think it's like I already read because I wanted to say where I find a gap now, even in the allocations, as Valentine puts it, is once it goes to Parliament, you see only lumped up sums of amounts. You don't get to see the distribution the way we are saying. The percentage, or rather, for example, the education sector, out of the 781 billion, this is what is going to free primary. This is what is going to teachers. This is what is going to probably solve other things. So you don't get to see that in the budget document, for example, that goes to Parliament. And for me, that is where I find the gap, because if we are talking about accountability and oversight for them as lawmakers, then they should be able to tell some of these gaps from that point, because whatever is presented to them is a lumped up amount. So for me, my number one solution is probably the Treasury needs to somehow, because when you get to engage them, they tell you that they get this. We were engaging the Ministry of Education someday, and they were saying they get their numbers from the economic survey, from the Kenya National KNBS. But then when you look at these institutions, they are even able to tell us as to the number of learners as males, as females, the number of schools per ward up to that level. But when it comes to budget, you cannot trace how many women, or rather how many girls as learners have been distributed this. When you go to the budget of TSC, for example, go to the details in the TSC, they can't be able to give you the details of how many teachers are receiving this money from the budget. But go to the budget books, it's just a lumped up amount.
All these things are things to watch as we go towards that home stretch. Later on today at about 3, when the CS Treasury does give the budget speech. We want to say a very good, big thank you. Valentine Mweni is a policy and research and budgeting at Haki Jamii, and Nelly Chepkemoi, policy and advocacy manager at We Care. Thank you for being here with us this morning. It's been the Situation Room, special coverage of budget 2026-2027. Nduh and Dennis have been here with you. Dennis, later on News Desk to give more information as it comes through. Today marks the beginning of the world's greatest sporting event, and that's the World Cup. And Robinson Okenya is on standby to take us through to that home stretch as we come to the end of this session of the budget coverage. Thank you for being here with us. Over to you, Robinson.
Well, thank you very much, Nduh and Dennis. And after 4 years of waiting, today is finally the day that the 2026 World Cup officially kicks off at 10 p.m. Mexico taking on South Africa at the Azteca Stadium, which has a capacity of 80,000 as the tournament begins. And for the next 1 month, we'll be taking a look at what is happening in the World Cup. And of course, today, after we go through the budget throughout the day, everybody at 10 p.m. will want to see how the World Cup kicks off. But remember, the opening ceremony will be at 8:30. But let's go through the World Cup in numbers. Remember, this year's World Cup will have 1,248 players and 48 teams are participating. Now, the World Cup in numbers: 6. Lionel Messi, Guillermo Ochoa, and Cristiano Ronaldo will go to the record 6th World Cup at this year's edition, which is the 23rd edition of the World Cup. Now, let's move away from number 6. We go to the next number, which is 9, and rather 13. And 13, Argentina's Lionel Messi is the 2026 player with the most World Cup goals to his name that is currently playing. The others have already exited the World Cup, but he's the active player at the World Cup with the most goals at the moment. That is 13. We go to the next number in while talking about the World Cup: 17. Now, 17-year-old sensational Gilberto Mora from Mexico will be the youngest player at this year's World Cup. He's 17 years old and 250 days. That is the youngest player in this year's edition of the World Cup. Now, 19, Manchester City, which is a club in the English Premier League, is the club with the most number of players at the World Cup. 19 players, and they are the best represented at the World Cup. Let's move away from that number because we still have other numbers at the World Cup. 22. We have 22 players in this year's World Cup that have won the World Cup before. Remember, a number of Argentina players have won the World Cup and they will be taking part again this World Cup. And we also have other players from the French squad that won it in 2018. Aside from that, these are the all-time top scorers in the World Cup. Miroslav Klose is the all-time top scorer with 16 goals. And then you have Ronaldo Nazario with 15. Gerd Müller, 14. Lionel Messi has 13. Just Fontaine has 13. Aside from that, we have Pelé with 12. Kylian Mbappe, 12. Jürgen Klinsmann, 11. Sandro Kossis has 11. And Gregor Lato has 10. Those are among the top scorers in the World Cup. There are those who also have 10, such as Thomas Müller, Helmut Tran, Teofilo Kubilas, Gabriel Batistuta, as well as Gary Lineker. They all have 10 goals. So we'll be waiting to see whether Lionel Messi will be moving to the all-time top scorers list. Now, there are countries that have won the World Cup before. Brazil has 5 World Cups. That was in 1958, 1962, 1970, 1994, and 2002. Now, after Brazil, you have Germany with 4, 1954, 1974, 1990, 2014. Italy has won it 4 times also, 1934, 1938, 1982, and 2006. Argentina, 1978, 1986, and 2022. France, 2 stars to their names. That is 1998, 2018. Uruguay has won it also twice. That was in 1930 and 1950. And England has only won it once. That was in 1966. And they're also asking, is it coming home this year? We'll have to wait and see. And Spain has also won it once. That was in 2010. Those are some of the teams that have won the World Cup. Now, this year's edition of the World Cup, people will be looking at 4 players to see what legacy they will be having at the World Cup. Lionel Messi already has 13 goals to his name, and he has played 26 games and has 13 assists. Ronaldo, 22 games, 8 goals, 2 assists to his name. Kylian Mbappe for France, 14 games, 12 goals, 3 assists. Neymar for Brazil, 13 games, 8 goals, and 4 assists. Now, these 3 gentlemen, that is Messi, Ronaldo, and Neymar, will be probably exiting the stage after the World Cup, with the question being, how well will they perform? Mbappe still has 1 or 2 more World Cups to come, and the question will be, with 12 goals, will he be the all-time top scorer at the World Cup? We'll have to wait and see until the 19th of July when the finals will be played. Those are some of the FIFA World Cup stats. But aside from that, we do have some. Previously, we've had different editions of the World Cup have different footballs. I know you know about the Jabulani that was used in 2010. You know about the Telstar that was used in 2014. Al Hilm that was used in 2022. So this year's World Cup ball is called the Trionda. Something that is very interesting about the Trionda, it's infused with AI, artificial intelligence, to make sure that it relays real-time information to the referee and the people at home, that they can see if a goal is scored, it's real-time. The referee doesn't have to wait for or pause for like 2 or 3, 20, 30 seconds before he gives that goal. So it's infused with artificial intelligence, technology taking over sports. Now let's move away from the Trionda. Let's get into the World Cup groups. Group A has Mexico and South Africa, which will be opening the World Cup today. And then you have South Korea and Czech Republic. That is Group A. Let's move to Group B, which has Canada, who are also the hosts, Bosnia, Qatar, and Switzerland. That is Group B. Let's move to Group C, which has Brazil, record World Cup winners, Morocco from Africa, Haiti, and Scotland. That is Group C. I know you are all looking forward to that tie between Brazil and Morocco. And then Group D has United States, which is also a host nation, Paraguay, Australia, and Turkey. And then in Group E, that is where you have Germany, who've won the World Cup 4 times, Curacao, Ivory Coast from Africa, as well as Ecuador. And then we move to Group F, which has the Netherlands, Japan, Sweden, and Tunisia from Africa. And after Group F, we go to Group G. Yes, remember, 48 teams, so we have a number of groups. In Group G, you have Belgium, Egypt, Iran, and New Zealand. Egypt from Africa, of course, 10 countries from Africa. Group H, you have Spain, Cape Verde, Saudi Arabia, as well as Uruguay. So all people will be looking at Cape Verde, who are making a debut at this World Cup, how well they will perform. Group I, a very interesting group, has France, 2-time World Cup champions. And then there is Senegal. The African champions are right there, as well as Iraq and Norway. That is Group I. And from I, we move to J. It has Argentina, who are the defending champions. And then you have Algeria from Africa. And then there is Austria, as well as Jordan, who are also making a debut at the World Cup. Now, from Group J, we move to Group K, which has Portugal, a team that is earmarked. Most people feel that it has the potential to win this year's edition of the World Cup because of Cristiano Ronaldo. And then DR Congo from Africa are also in that group. They're making, this will be the second time they are participating at the World Cup. And then there's Uzbekistan and Colombia. And then from Group K, we go to Group L, which has the 3 Lions of England, Croatia, Ghana from Africa, and Panama. Those are the 10 groups at the World Cup. Remember, at this year's World Cup, we have 10 African teams. Which team are you rooting for? Personally, I'm rooting for Senegal, but we'll have to wait and see. But remember, today's clash, the opening fixture, will see Mexico take on South Africa at 10 p.m. Kenyan time. Well, that is where we wrap up. And for our listeners and viewers on SpiceFM, that is where we wrap up. But you can continue with the conversation on the budget from 10 p.m. on KTN.
Spice up your life. The latest news from around the world. 94.4 Spice FM.
Good morning. This is the News Wire. I'm Leah Ubaga. The budget for the 2026-2027 financial year was approached with greater care to prevent unnecessary spending in an effort to ensure that funds are spent properly. Treasury CS John Badi says the national Treasury carefully and comprehensively reviewed the estimates of various government departments and smoothed out existing gaps with the aim of balancing government spending. He gave the example of the Department of Energy, which he says was forced to eliminate some of its spending because some projects in the sector are being implemented through private sector partnerships.
Every expenditure was justified before being captured, and that is why you will see, for example, in certain state departments like energy, we have reduced the budget for energy significantly to now only 35 billion. Why? Because we realized out of this engagement that a lot of projects that are being funded through that state department are commercially viable projects that can easily be implemented outside the normal budgeting process, and that. But I wouldn't say it is perfect because this is the first year of implementation. There is already a tool that we have that we gave to state departments and various MDAs to use.
Speaking on his way to his office, Mbadi says the Ministry of Finance will present a policy plan that will provide legal direction on government spending that is aimed at sparing the nation from the effects of emerging conflicts, citing the ongoing war in Iran as an example.
Because again, if you don't plan well, then you cannot have a good budget and even a good financial plan. Now, that is one thing that we are going to do. But I want to just point out